We won't
says
have to
wait.
do that every level. You can. It's just at the start of the session.
Just once.
Yeah.
There's. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Oh, cool. That was easy.
Okay, so we're ready to go whenever you're ready.
Fantastic. Oh. Hello. Wow, look at you.
Hello.
You're ready for global warfare.
I'm not even sure what outfit I'm wearing right now. Oh, I'm in black.
Black and black. What am I wearing? Got no legs.
You'll have the standard outfit.
Which is what? Yellow?
I'll change mine so it's the same. There you go.
Blue. Very nice.
Blue and yellow. Spike says to tell you that he's won his battle.
Okay. You didn't get boarded again then, that's nice.
So, like, I can equip sort of clothing and skins that I've unlocked in my game.
Yeah.
But I
see your
can't
funky
use
gloves.
my equipment.
No.
Yeah.
It's kind of fair enough. Do you know what? First thing I got to say is I love how tight this feels. There's no lag. It's really, really sharp and it looks great. That's cool. Right,
so, if you scroll your mouse wheel, it'll scroll through your different attachments. But you can also do that by holding down 2.
Yeah, okay.
And then 3 is your cleaning liquids once you buy some of those. But you would need to buy a soap nozzle as well.
Right, okay. Do I need to know what these nozzles do? Is it some of them have got numbers on? Yeah,
so all the numbers is just kind of like the different degrees, and it's basically from red. The lower the number, the more pressure you get, but the narrower the width.
Got you.
And depending on, because you will be able to buy different power washers. Obviously, at the moment you won't be able to because you will. How am I trying to say? You'll you earn money as you do jobs.
Yeah. And then I can buy.
Then you can buy like better equipment and things like that.
Grades and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's weird. When I press, it says C is aim mode. But it's moving like a centimeter. What's? Oh, I see. I see. So I can stand still.
So, they introduced this because originally when not the aim mode, the other mode was the only mode in the game for a long time. But a lot of people were getting motion sickness from using this, so they introduced the aim.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's pretty cool, actually.
It doesn't move the camera around as much, you see.
That's very smart. Right. Are we ready to attack this van?
I'm ready when you are.
To start anywhere, or?
Yep.
Does it matter, because obviously there's mud on the front, does it matter that there's... Oh god, that's loud. That made me jump.
You might want to adjust your sound, because the water sounds can be pretty loud. I've got mine down quite low.
Okay, options, audio, master volume. Boom. Okay.
So what you'll notice with that nozzle is this is really good for like sweeping large areas, but it doesn't bring off ingrained mud at all.
Oh, I see. Yeah. There's like sections that are not. I don't know if I'm just washing the same bit over and over again, or.
No, well, you can see where you cleaned.
So
Start on the roof.
why is the bonnet 2 different colours? I'm confused when it does that. Is it drying out? Is that what?
Yes.
Ah, okay. I have a real pressure washer at home, and I love using it. It's so rewarding.
I don't have a pressure washer, but it's like if I wasn't sick, I think I could easily do a pressure washer business. Like, there's something really
like meditative.
Really, so yeah, it's like it's very you get a lot of satisfaction. I do. I get a lot of satisfaction seeing things come clean as well. So I think I could have enjoyed doing that on a daily basis.
I've just spotted in the top left-hand corner we got like a percentage.
Yes, and if you hold your reticule over something, it tells you, like, it shows you the percentage of that particular thing. So like you'll see the body, and then if you point at the window, it tells you the like the little white line is how much dirt there is left.
I get it. Oh, and it gives you like a little ding when it's 100%.
Yes.
I wonder what that was. Okay, cool.
So there is an achievement to clean a level. I think it's to 95% without getting any of those dings.
Okay, that's an interesting challenge.
Took me a few attempts.
Have you 100%ed this completely?
I have one achievement which I have not got, but everything else I've got. Like, I mean, I've completed the game about 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
I've done all the special levels multiple times. I helped a friend complete this. And then achievements were fairly recent, and the weekend that the achievements came out, I just hammered it to get as many of the achievements that I can. There's something called a challenge mode, and there's different things that you can do in the challenge mode. So it'll give you like set equipment, and you either have to do it under a certain time, or you've got to do it. You have like a water limit, so and you can earn medals. And I'm not so bad at the timed ones, but I like to take my time with the game. And that's kind of like, I don't like rushing it. So the achievement that I haven't completed is to win 5 gold medals.
How do you get a gold medal?
So you do those challenge modes, and you've got to do it like in the quickest time or the lowest amount of water.
Oh, okay, that's how you get the medals, right?
Yeah. But I'm not a huge fan of the challenge modes. They're alright, but it's kind of like, that's not where I get my fun from. So I'm sure some people would love the challenges, and that's fine.
Some people do, don't they? Some people are all about challenges and stuff. I thought I'd done a pretty good job until I hit the show me the dirt button.
Yeah, that's usually the way. Now remove those steps to the way.
Am I going to get in there? Oh wow!
So
yeah,
remember that you can change stance by.
Is that important? Getting the angles.
Sometimes.
Alrighty.
Like right
I
now,
can't get this.
I'm really down low because. Also, you're on the. Sometimes it's the angle, sometimes it's changing the pressure. Right, what is it you're trying to get?
Trying to get these yellow bits in the grill. Did you just do that instantly? Oh my god! How did
So
you do that?
there is a little trick. Okay, so when you looked at that, you know, if you came down to the lowest stance, so the laid down stance, where the headlight is there, the top of the rim of that headlight was dirty. And sometimes if you find like a larger patch of dirt, do that first, because you don't have to 100% clean everything for it to ding. You only have to get it so far and it'll ding. So
Right.
occasionally there'll be like tiny bits that you really struggle to get. So like look for something on the object that you can sort of easier get to.
This game's brutal. I had no idea.
This is the easiest level, dude.
Okay, this is like...
You're gonna get a rude awakening with the next one, which is a lot of time when I've seen sort of people stream this game and stuff. They do this level and it's like, oh, this is great, and then they go to the next level and it's like, why is this taking so long? Because the next level after this is like humongous compared to this, but they differ in size. So you have like throughout the game, throughout career mode, you like on every level that you do locks further levels, of course. And sometimes you get a choice between which one you want to do first and things like that.
Okay, so it's not completely linear.
No, but it's split into like locations, which are bigger levels, and vehicles,
Right.
which are obviously tend to be smaller. So which bumper is it that we're missing here? It's not that one. It must be the front one.
How do you know it's a bump? Oh, I see, yeah, because yeah,
It's
oh,
right,
it's underneath.
right
Cheeky is that? Oh my god. See, I'm glad you're here, because I'd never have found that.
at every angle.
Alright,
There we go, there's the Vandon. So when we load into the next level, don't start cleaning, because there is an achievement you can get. If we clean the stepstone, we're going to do a garden next. If we clean the stepstones in the garden first, you'll get an achievement.
Okay. And I like that it just gave us a little snapshot of what we just did. That's cool.
Yes. Yeah, so only the host gets that in a co-op game, but obviously I've seen them all multiple times anyway, so it's not a big deal.
So we're cleaning the back garden.
Yes.
At 213 Walnut Street, Muckingham. I like it.
Yeah, so that's the name of the village that like we live in. Live/work in.
So you were telling me before, when I knew nothing about this game, that there's also like a background story to it as well.
Yes. Yeah. So
when does that sort of?
It hasn't really. So you know, as you're cleaning, you get those messages that come up on your screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's to do with if you read the brief for the levels and read those messages, it'll like tell you parts of the story. But we're only just getting into it. So the first part of the story is actually to do with the cat that's on the shed roof. If you look over to the shed.
See, yeah.
That's Ulysses, the mayor's cat, who is missing.
Okay.
Okay. So that's kind of like the first part of the story, really.
Okay. So what are we aiming at here?
So these.
Just these things.
Yeah. And do you know that you can hold down left click, or if you hit right click, it'll just toggle it on.
Oh wow! I did not know that. It's awesome.
Yeah, it makes life a lot easier. So if we get all these done, then you should get an achievement. And again, sort of for the viewers or anything, only the host gets achievements. So
okay.
If you want to do the achievements, you're going to have to either host a game or, do it in single player.
So does this have? Let me just check here. You can see it's cross-platform compatible.
Yes.
It doesn't have Steam Share, so you can't share it with other people who don't have the game.
No.
Okay.
So one of these.
We've got to do the And I knew it'd be one I was doing.
I'm just checking them all. Right, you should have had an achievement come up.
I may have done. I was a bit distracted by the Steam page.
That's okay.
I can check it on Steam, can't I? Can I see it on Steam?
Yep.
See if I did get one. Yes. First steps.
Yeah, that's the one.
Nice.
So now we can just go to it. So
Right.
my trick, well, not my trick, but my advice is to stay away from using the white nozzle until you get the white nozzle is
Not
really
powerful enough.
no. Most of the time you'll have to go over it. So I normally stick to the green and the yellows most of the time.
Are we doing the fence as well?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So you've got all the fence to do. The lattice fence is kind of tricky because of the angles.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm
but
starting to get the idea.
Yeah. So I'll start on the fence at the other side. And we'll get all the fence done first.
Got to say, I like the modelling, the design of it. It's very coolly
Bilbo.
done. Well, I can feel that motion sickness coming in.
Okay, so make sure you go into aim mode then.
Yeah. I can see how that would make... I don't think that would bother me normally.
It doesn't. It doesn't bother me on this game. I can get it with some other games.
Right.
Have you ever heard of a game called 𝗬𝗂𝗬𝗂𝗀𝗃?
No.
Okay, so the idea of that game is that you're a space janitor, right? And you go into like different places, like after there's been an accident or something, and you like clean up the area, basically. But it's quite funny in a lot of. It's very tongue in cheek, and like some of the levels are kind of like what you would see in like a sci-fi themed sort of RPG shooter kind of game. You know, like Duke Nukem sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So like you go in and clean up all the bodies and stuff like that. And in that, luckily they introduced a thing in that to help with motion sickness, because I used to get motion sick in that a lot. But this one doesn't bother me at all.
I don't normally, because I play a lot of VR games, so I don't normally suffer with it, but because I've had a headache for the last sort of couple of days, I think I'm a bit bit more susceptible at the moment.
Yeah, I probably would if I sort of was in... I get migraines now and again, so...
yeah, actually that's what it felt like.
Kind of like in the aftermath of a migraine or something, I'm sure I probably would. But hopefully the aim mode will help lessen that for me.
Yeah, it'll probably help anyone who's watching as well.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
So how many levels does the game have?
Ooh, quite a lot. Probably about 30, I would say, at a guess.
And do they get more complex than this? Bigger?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The last level took me 2.5 hours, I think.
Wow. Is that just on your own?
Yeah.
Oh, blimey. In one session?
I didn't do it in one session, I did it in two.
Right.
Rather than one sitting. So it was I'd unlocked the very last level. Because you know, I've been playing this game in early access for quite a long time, so the very last level of the game hasn't been out that long. I think it's kind of like a couple of months now. And sort of the last section of the game, right before the game went, you know, actually released rather than early access.
Yeah.
They added about 3 new levels. And so I was like trying to get the story mode finished, as it were. And then I hit the last level, but it was really late at night, and realistically I shouldn't have started the level because it was so late. But I was like, I was too excited. So I'd started the level, and I was kind of like, I think I was cleaning for about an hour, and I was like, I've got to go to bed. So you know, you can just kind of exit at any time, and it saves your progress. So that's something else that I really like about it. When I first got the game, because I got the game quite early on, you couldn't save in the middle of a level. So if you started a level, you were kind of committed to cleaning it.
Oh.
But I mean, that's quite a long time ago now. I think I've had this about 18 months or something. I saw somebody do the van level and this level, and it was on online, and I was kind of like, yeah, I want this game. Because I suffer a lot with stress and anxiety.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
When I get like that, and I've kind of always been that way, if I get stressed and stuff, I want to clean. But because I'm now physically disabled, it's really difficult for me to kind of fulfill that urge, shall we say.
So this is a great substitute for you.
Yeah. So when I get like really anxious and I just need something to kind of like focus on, I found this very, very therapeutic. So
awesome.
Because it's nice and chilled, and you can go at your own speed, and you know, all of those things. And there's just something strangely satisfying about seeing all the dirt go.
Yeah. Feel good moment.
It's quite a simple game, but I really loved it. I've got about 200 hours out of it or something. So.
Pretty good. How long do you think it would take to complete the whole game?
Like, if you play it in co-op, not like, I think you could probably do, if you hit it hard and you did long sessions, you could easily do this game in a weekend, I would say.
Really?
If there's two of you.
Yeah.
If you're on your own, probably you'd say double that time, because obviously there's only one person cleaning rather than two. But one of the, like, you can, any level that you sort of complete, you can then play in free play mode, and you can have like up to 6 people doing it. I've done a free play level with a couple of my friends, so there was like 3 of us. Yeah.
Do you get achievements for doing that?
While. No, I don't think so. You do get an achievement for doing a co-op level. The first level that you complete in a co-op game, you do get an achievement for that. But like, there's various different achievements. So you have some achievements where it's like clean such and such first, or clean such and such last. And then like you get achievements for like certain levels and things like that. And there's a couple of special things as well.
Oh, you would like the way I'm cleaning this. Not that bit. Not that bit where I got overconfident and missed.
Time to climb up here.
Reminds me of my garden, this does.
Just throw in, stuff like
We only have a small yard. It's an older house, and when they put we have paving stones in half of the yard, and when they put the paving stones, there's no like weed liner underneath.
Right.
So it's kind of like a constant battle to keep the grass under control. It's got lots of grass and dandelions trying to grow through the cracks in the paving stones.
Yeah, ours is much the same.
Well, we have a absolute ton of trees out of the front of our house, and this time of year we just always have leaves. You could clean the leaves like 4 times a day and there'd still be leaves on the ground.
They'll never be beaten.
Yeah, it's really nice most of the year, but it's sort of a pain in the butt when. And it's
I do
not
like
too bad
autumn.
yet, but sort of by the end of this month we'll be inundated by leaves. Usually we leave them for like a couple of weeks and then gather them up, bag them up, sort of thing.
Whoa, gosh. Jumps really high.
Yeah, sometimes you can. There's also some levels where you get some tidbits and stuff, like there's things that can happen in the level or that you discover in the level that actually have nothing to do with the story, but they're nice little tokens. So there's a cottage that you can clean in the forest, and on the brief for the level it says about how they got the cottage cheap because the people that had lived there had been involved in a bank robbery and they'd been put away.
Okay.
And when you start cleaning the level, one of the walls that you clean actually has the spray painted plan for the bank job on it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And there's like a level where you find like all these huge footprints as though there's like a Bigfoot and he kind of like out in the forest. But it turns out just to be somebody's cousin or something he's like an outdoorsy
With big
type.
feet.
Yeah, and he's like he's over 7 feet tall and stuff.
So I thought I'd done a good job over here, and then I lay down and realised I'd missed loads.
Yeah, easily done. Very easily done. I was like, try to get. I mean, obviously, I've done the levels multiple times now, so I know where the tricky places are. But my approach to like new levels and stuff was always like get rid of the thick of the dirt first, and then you'll be able to see like the stubborn stains that are difficult to get rid of.
So glad you told me about the right click thing.
I didn't know that for the longest time, and I was getting like really sore hands from holding down left click all the time. And then one day my cat ran across my desk and stood at the right click, and I was like,
"You're joking!"
It's been there the whole time.
I hope your cat got extra treats that night.
The same cat drowned me like twice playing GTA 5 RP.
Is that the role-playing thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I bought Grand Theft Auto 5 when it came out, and I only played it for about 20 minutes.
I've played a lot more of like online and stuff like that. I enjoyed playing it a lot with with my mates and stuff. Had a lot of fun. Made quite a few friends and stuff. Doing online roleplay with it as well. That can be a lot of fun.
I struggle with roleplay.
See, we do tabletop roleplay as well. So.
Do you really?
Yeah.
I've got one game called It's called U-Boat.
Yeah,
You know it.
yeah, I know of it. Yeah.
So that's kind of a role play game, sort of, a little bit. You got to kind of get into it.
Mhm.
And I had the wife, my mother, and my youngest son as my crew.
Mhm.
It was quite fun. I did get into that. That's about as far as I went with role play.
I've been role playing since let's see, 1999, I think, maybe 98.
Was that all like Dungeons and Dragons type stuff?
Kind of. I personally don't play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. The thing that got me into roleplay was a game called Vampire the Masquerade.
Okay, never heard of it, but okay.
So the whole
Is that a PC game or?
there are PC games that are in the universe. Yes. Old ones now, but they're still very good. Because it's all story driven and it's that's very good. There's so you had the first PC game was called Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, and it was set in medieval Prague for the most part. And you played a character called Christoph, who was he was a knight in the Crusades. And like you follow sort of his, through the story of the game, and different things happen to him and stuff. You start off human and he gets turned into a vampire and things like that. And
like
then
you do.
Yep. And then the second PC game was called Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and that was set in well, it's set in Los Angeles. I think it's from the trying to think when it came out. Early 2000s, I think it came out. And in that so the vampires in the world of the overall setting is called the World of Darkness, because they have other game lines as well, werewolves and mummies and mages, which are kind of like sorcerers and stuff. There's all sorts of things. It's a massive universe. But the thing that is kind of easy for a lot of people, it's not like a fantasy land. It's set in a world that's very similar to our own. It's just like, if you imagine the dark and seediness of our world, it's kind of like just worse. It's kind of like the worst part of humanity. So politicians are nearly always corrupt. There's a lot of corruption in the police force, and
Oh, it's a
like
simulator. I see. Okay.
yeah. So it's that kind of thing. And basically the whole adage is, so like games such as Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a lot of other games that there's, when you look into the world of tabletop RPG games, there's an awful lot of different offerings out there. And like it's really made a resurgence the last, I would say, sort of 5 years or so. It's become very, very popular.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think stuff like it's featured a lot in some quite popular TV shows, and we've had some. There's a lot of like streams of live games and things now.
Right.
And I think that's all kind of helped with the popularity. It's we're in an age now where it's cool to be a nerd, right? So I think that all of that has kind of helped with the popularity. But I know, like, for the most part, RPGs are probably the most popular that they've ever been. And there's massive gaming conventions, and there's games everywhere that you can watch of just about any system, because there's systems for like Star Wars, Star Trek, lots of popular sci-fi and fantasy stuff. There's horror games. There's games for just about anything these days. There's games where you can play animals and weird and wonderful things. It's kind of crazy. But the thing that always, like, I was always a big fan of like Dracula and stuff like that when I was younger. I really liked Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that. And so when I kind of I was seeing how it started for me. I was seeing a guy who was involved in roleplay, and the way that my work schedule was, I always worked on a Saturday because it was one of our busiest days. But what I used to do was go to his house after I finished work on a Saturday and stay on the Sunday, and then I would usually have Monday as my day off, which was arranged with my boss, because obviously we always have a day off in the week because we work on the Saturday. But I asked if we could organise so I could have my day off on a Monday, and then I would stay with him like Sunday and Monday and come back home on the Monday night ready for work the next day. And he used to, on a Sunday, before we got together and that, he used to do roleplay through the university that he was at. And he was kind of like, I'll just miss a week sort of thing. And I was like, no, it's no need to do that. I can come and like, they'll just bring a book and sit in the corner and read. Needless to say, I didn't get very much reading done. I've always been one where I like creating stories out of things.
Okay.
Even as a kid, like I did stupid things. Like I had a massive tub. I was really into marbles when I was younger.
I like marbles.
But I had a big tub. Do you remember what the heck was it? The milk powder tubs.
What, like for babies?
No, it's like Coffee Mate, but it was it might even have been called Marvel, I think, in the UK.
Okay.
I can't remember. But it's that kind of thing, It's like a milk substitute it's basically skimmed milk powder.
Right.
That you put in drinks. And I had one of those that I kept my marbles in. And I had a whole bunch of marbles that were like, the standard see-through ones. And then I had loads that were like
Your
opaque.
special ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I used to play I played make-believe all the time when I was a kid. I wasn't one for dressing up and stuff, but I used to make stories out of everything. And my marbles were in 2 different gangs, and they had like turf wars and things like that. So,
Wow.
I was a very imaginative kid. So like I always made up stories and shit like this with all my toys. And like I was very much a tomboy, so I had like He-Man figures, but I also had I didn't have Barbies, I had Cindy's, if you remember those.
Well, loosely, yeah.
Yeah, so I had Cindy dolls. My Cindy doll dated Murdoch out of the 80s. That was her boyfriend.
Fantastic.
Despite him being half the size of her and just weird stuff that kids do, right? So like I became very engrossed in the story really quickly. Because I'd gone and they used to meet up in this, like, it was one of the it was like a hall that the university had, and because it was like a university club, so they got to use this hall, and it was a really large hall, and they would like set up their table at one end, and they'd all be sat around there playing, and I kind of went off to the side and I was sat with my book, but I ended up sort of listening in, and then I kind of moved closer so I could listen. And at the end of the session, when everybody was, packing up and that, I went over to the guy that was running the game and I was like, do you mind if I ask you some questions? And he was like, okay. And I was like, come over here sort of thing, away from the other players. And I was like, is this and this and this what's actually happening? And he's like, how did you work that out? And I was just like, I don't know. I really loved the idea. Anyway, my boyfriend at the time, he was getting ready. That game that he was in was almost at the end of the campaign. So it's like it's a story arc sort of thing. And it was almost finished. and he was going to be running the next game, and I was like, all right. And he was like, you can join in if you want. And I was like, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. And so I was like, is it the same thing? And he's like, oh no, it's a different system. So he started telling me about it and that, and because I've always been a big, horror genre kind of person, and it was vampires that kind of caught my attention. And so he let me look at the rule book. And I looked at the rule book for a couple of hours, and I ended up taking it home for a week, and I read it cover to cover, and I just fell in love with it.
Wow, okay.
And I've been running the game since the year after that.
You've been doing that for how many years now?
Let me think. 23 years?
23 years. And you do one how often?
On and off. I'm getting ready to start running sessions. I actually start a new game on Saturday, which will be every 2 weeks. Just because most of the friends that I play with and that everybody's busy and got loads of stuff on in their lives, so we tend to do it every 2 weeks rather than every week, just to make it easier for everybody to be able to join in.
How long would a session last on average?
I tend to keep mine between 2.5 and 3 hours.
Okay, so it's a proper session.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, wow.
It's hard to concentrate after that. I mean, I've done full day games in the past where, we would meet up about 10 o'clock in the morning, and then we would stop at 1 for lunch and then continue playing till sort of 5 or 6 in the evening, and then we would pack up and all go to the pub for food.
Nice.
That sort of thing. So I've done various different things over the years, but the whole thing that I really like about the games in World of Darkness is that you don't play a hero like in Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. You play, you're like an adventurer, and you're sort of meant to be a hero, and you're helping the people, and that's why you kind of do these adventures and these quests and what have you to sort of help people along the way, just like in MMOs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in World of Darkness games, 9 times out of 10, you are the monster. You're the bad guy, essentially.
Oh, okay.
But you kind of so when you play a vampire, your nature is to kill, obviously.
Yeah.
But you don't want to slip into being a mindless beast. So you're trying to sort of control themselves, and they have their own sort of. They've got kind of like a political system, and and it can get very kind of Game of Thronesy when it comes to the politics and stuff. Lots of backstabbing, political intrigue, but it also depends on how you want to run the game, because you can run the game where it's very combat heavy, or investigations, anything you want basically.
So can I just ask? So these storylines are made up on the spot, or they're planned in advance, or how does that work?
It depends upon the person that's running the game. Okay. For me personally, when I'm running a game, I like the game to be quite dynamic. So I like my players to be able to do mostly what they want. Obviously, if they mess about and they do stupid things, if they start going around killing loads of people, there's consequences for that.
What would a consequence be? What would that look like?
Well, there's things in the world called it's now called the Second Inquisition, where a whole bunch of government bodies have discovered vampires are real, and they've all banded together to kind of hunt them down.
Right.
There's also hunters, vampire hunters and stuff in the world, that are slightly less organized. So there are dangers, and one of the most upstanding things in a game of vampires is something called the masquerade. So it's they're supposed to live under the radar, so humans don't know about them.
Right.
And there's as a vampire itself, there's ways to kind of mask what you are, and things like that, because they do have special powers that you can learn. They're called disciplines. And you can do all sorts of things. So you can have super strength, super speed. You can read and control minds. You can do sort of blood magic. There's lots of things that you can do. Not
I'm a bit nervous to ask,
everything.
but what is blood magic? What is that? I'm
So
assuming it involves
it's
blood.
complicated.
Okay.
Yes. So if you remember me saying that in the overall world, so in the overall setting, there are things called mages, which are like sorcerers.
Yeah. Okay.
So blood magic came about because there's a clan. So vampires kind of like follow bloodlines. The whole premise, kind of like where vampires came from, is believed to be to do with the curse of Cain, as in Cain and Abel.
Okay.
Now you don't have to, like, there's a lot of stuff laid out in the books that you can include, but you don't have to. It's completely up to you. But sort of like the idea is that he was the first vampire, because he became cursed by God to live in darkness. So it's kind of like they've taken a lot of modern myths and things like that and put their own sort of twist on them. And so what happened then was Cain was alone for a long time, and he didn't want to be. So like he basically embraced other people to become vampires, and there ended up being like 13 vampiric bloodlines, as it were. So kind of like families, and each one has kind of like a preference for certain ideals and certain ways of like how their powers display, and kind of like
I'm guessing some of them like humans, some of them hate humans, that kind of thing.
That's very independent upon the actual vampire.
Okay, so that would be decided during the game.
During character creation and that, yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that's interesting. There's a character creation.
Yeah, you normally do that before the game starts. So you kind of come up with a concept of the character that you want to play, and then you work with the GM and the other players that you're going to be playing with, because obviously ultimately you've got to work together. You may decide to play characters that really don't like each other, and that's absolutely fine. Obviously you need to be a bit mature about that, and we always have a discussion as to well, we tend not to have a discussion because we always the people that I play with, we've been playing together for over 8 years now,
so everyone sort of gets it.
Yeah, we all know what makes each other uncomfortable and stuff like that, so we stay away from things like that. So even
You're
though
all
it's a
there to
horror
have
game,
fun.
one of my friends that enjoys playing, she's not big into horror, so I try to keep the, like, I don't do graphic violence, I don't do gore, I don't do anything that's really, really scary, because I don't want to make her uncomfortable. It's about having fun,
Yeah.
But there's plenty of things that you can. There's a limitless amount of things that you can do with it. So, and like I always like to try and encourage my players to have something sort of interesting and juicy to do with the characters. And I encourage people to play something that they wouldn't necessarily normally play as well. Like, don't be afraid to try something new is my thing when it comes to role-playing games. You might have always played like in terms of D&D, you might have always played like a fighter sort of character, but there's nothing wrong with trying something completely different, because sometimes when you try something completely different, you'll find something that you really love and you didn't think you would.
That's interesting.
Me personally, it happened to one of my friends a few years ago. I was running a werewolf game set in the same world, and it's actually set in New York, my game. And she was sort of struggling with an idea for what character she wanted to play. And I said, look, why don't you do something different? She normally plays quite sort of confident characters and things like this, and basically she plays a lot of like social characters, so they're very, like, she's very good at kind of like talking on the spot, fast talking, anything like that. Really, really good at coming up with ideas on the fly. And so I encouraged her to try something a little bit unusual. So in Werewolf, they kind of have like roles that they play in society. In their society, not in human society. And one of those roles is called, they have their own language, so it's based upon how they say it. It's called a galliard. And basically they're like the law keepers, and they're like they're essentially like the bards of old, where they kind of keep their oral traditions and tell the stories about, the tribes, their good deeds and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I suggested that she tried this, and she was kind of like, I don't know whether I'll get along with it or not. So we worked together and we created this character her name is Jules. And she has a bit of a checkered past. So she's got, basically her father wasn't on the scene from her being young. She didn't really know why he'd left and stuff like that. I actually took liberties with that. He's actually a werewolf. And he, her mother was had problems with alcohol and drugs, and after an argument she'd actually told the father that she'd terminated the pregnancy, and so he left her because of that. And so he didn't actually know that Jaws existed at the start of the game.
God, okay. That's a lot to process.
Yeah, we liked it. Me and her like doing a lot of really in-depth character stuff. It doesn't have to be as serious as that. It's just, we enjoyed that, me and her personally, and like we can get into that. Some of my players, it's nowhere near as deep as that, and that's fine. I like to tailor make it for what each person enjoys, and I can go into as much depth or as little depth as possible, as the player wants, basically. I've played some characters myself that have had some really dark, sordid pasts. It's just whatever you enjoy,
I guess that kind of stays with you, right?
I enjoy story and character development, and that's kind of like where I choose to be. And my friend who created Jules, she's very much the same. And she'd much rather have a character that has a lot of flaws and a bit of a dark side that's more interesting to play. She finds it more interesting to play the same as I would. And with her character, we did a lot of things with her, and basically she was kind of like this really reserved, quiet introvert. But so with werewolves, they are kind of like a different species to humans, but for all intents and purposes, they look human most of the time. And then
except for when there's a full moon.
No, it's not like that.
Is it not?
It's not. Other things are tied to the moon, but they can change outside of the lunar cycle after their first change. At first, they can't really control it. So you basically.
Oh, there's a lot to know, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot of lore. So they kind of have this awakening. Sometimes there's like in their late teens is quite common, but it can be like their early 20s, and it can occasionally happen later in life through a traumatic experience, where they basically like awaken to the fact that they are a werewolf, and they go through a full first change, and usually it's very violent and very bloody. Again, you don't have to go into massive details over what happened. I did with a lot of my players, but not all of them. Spike's character, for instance, he was playing a character who was a ladies' man. He was basically like a playboy.
Right.
And his first change happened during a romantic, well, not a romantic, but a sexual encounter.
Right.
And
Clarity.
but he ended up kind of eating the person.
Yeah,
It killed her and partially ate her.
it was tasty.
Again, there was
coconut.
consequences of that followed him over into the game. He created something called he created something called a murder spirit, and they had that then sort of took possession of somebody in the neighborhood, and it all kind of went really wrong, and they had to sort it out. But yeah, and
Gone. 4 days. Gone.
So it's just, for me, the reason that I like that game in particular is because it's all about the story and the development of the character and how the characters work together or don't work together, that I find fun and exciting. It's interesting to explore and just basically tell stories together is essentially what it is. And then if it's dramatically appropriate, that's when I get people to roll a dice. I don't get people to roll dice for everything.
Oh, hang on. That obviously means something. What does roll the dice mean?
So
is that
you have a character sheet. When you create your character, you have a character sheet which has statistics.
Health, magic.
Yeah, but
things
you have
like that?
attributes and skills and things like this as well.
Okay.
And it's just a representation of how your character. So my first character, for example, he was a soldier in the First World War, but before he joined the service, he was a professional boxer.
Okay.
And so I
could get behind that story or that character.
Yeah.
I should say.
See, he had skills that showed, he had good fighting skills, but he could fight with his fists, but he didn't necessarily know how to use like a knife or a sword, or you know what I mean. So, and then if you're doing a task, so if you're doing a regular task, I'm just sparring with the dummy, that's what you do. But if you're fighting someone, so you're either in a boxing match or a fight breaks out or whatever, then you would then roll the appropriate dice to do with the statistics on your character sheet to see whether you win or fail and what the outcome can be. There's some complications with Vampire in particular. The version that we're playing at the moment is the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, which introduced a new mechanic called hunger. So previously, as a vampire, you had a blood pool. So you always had, if you wanted to do anything vampiric, you used blood to power that. And whereas that's still the case, rather than just having, X amount of points that you're kind of tracking, what happens now is the more hungry your vampire is, the more likely they are to fail, and their bestial nature will take over. Right, what are we missing here? Let's see. Come on, details work. Okay. Garden chairs. So at the moment, when you're not sure what to clean, press escape.
Yep.
Click on details. You'll see clean the back garden, then there's overview, details, and messages.
Oh yeah.
And on the details list, you can scroll down until you find something that's not clean. And then if you click on that, it'll highlight it.
Garden table.
Mm-hmm. So then like I've highlighted the chair, and it's this chair that's not. Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's not clean at all. Yes. So sorry. Back to the vampire. So they have this hunger system. So basically, you always, what happens with the hunger system is say that you are rolling 4 dice for whatever it is that you're trying to do, and your character has a hunger of 1, you would replace one of the standard dice with something called a hunger die, basically just a dice that's a different color, so you know which one it is. But if you fail on the roll and your hunger dice also, if you roll like a 1 on hunger dice, you have something called a bestial failure, and that is where your true vampiric nature really comes into play. And a lot of the times it's down to the person running the game, in this case they're known as the storyteller, as to what happens. So for an example, quite a while ago we were playing a game of vampire, and Spike's character was a cop, and he was trying to run down a suspect, sorry, not a victim, he became a victim. And he cornered, like he was making the roll to kind of like keep up with the guy.
Well, that happens. That failed my hunger twice.
Yeah, so his hunger was getting quite high. It goes between 1 and 5, basically. His hunger was getting quite high, and so he had a much higher chance of like messing up the roll, basically. And so I'd made him roll to see if he could keep up with the guy, and unfortunately he got a bestial failure. And so, like, yeah, he totally ran the guy down and he could keep up with him, but his vampiric nature took over and he went into hunt mode. So he basically jumped on the guy and sunk his teeth in and started feeding on him.
And then Sarah tried.
And then we had another character who tried to intervene, and she was also very hungry, and because of all the blood, she then failed a hunger roll and joined in.
Okay, so things can change rather dramatically.
Yes.
And there's nothing you can do. You can't say, well, I don't want that to happen.
But that's the consequences of playing a vampire. See, the more hungry that you get, and this is all vampires come to learn it quite quickly after they're created, that they have to keep their hunger in check. If during the course of the session that night, because most of the characters were getting pretty hungry, if they had taken an hour out and gone feeding, the chances are it wouldn't have happened. So it's one of those...
Right.
You know, there's always a chance. And there's a couple of things that you can do. So, sometimes you can resist the roll. It sort of comes down to the player. It can be fun to go with those and kind of deal with the consequences later. But it is ultimately up to you. If you suspected that person had absolutely dire information and you wanted to avoid that, there are things that you can do mechanically to kind of regain control.
Okay.
Occasionally it's out of your hands, but...
Are we doing one more?
I'm happy to keep going whenever you are.
I'm guessing it's going to be between the bungalow and the playground. What would you recommend?
Either's good. I would say the playground probably takes a bit longer than the bungalow.
Okay. Is that the one with the weird ball achievement?
Yes.
Can we have a go at that one?
Sure.
Okay. You told me about that and now I'm intrigued, you see. Okay. Dirt Finder, got a frankly ridiculous situation on your hands. I'm sorry, I didn't see who that was who subbed in. Do apologise. You see some of the local children have been coming down with a curious and unsightly form of dermatitis, and a few fretful folk have been putting it down to the condition of the recreational facilities. They do look filthy. It's all nonsense, of course, but if we could just humour them and give the whole thing a thorough hose down, you would be most grateful. Is that a relevant storyline type thing?
Not so much, no.
Okay. So I just read that for no reason. Such is my luck. Oh, right. So hang on, I can pick up stuff.
Yes. So if you look, you'll now have blue outlines, and that's where you can put the ladders.
Oh, that's rather cool.
Yeah. Because this step stool you can take and place freely, but the ladders have to go in certain places.
Right.
You can't just put them anywhere. So the ball thing, if you come over to this dinosaur slide over here.
Where did you go? Oh, over there. Yep.
Over here. So you see there's a football.
Oh, yes.
You have to use your squirty to kind of get the football. And then you've got to shoot it up the slide.
Oh, okay. White's not doing it. What colour should I be using here?
Probably yellow. Oh, I tell you what would be a good idea before you do this. If you press escape and press the little shopping basket at the top right hand corner of the tablet.
Yep.
Then go to equipment. And let me just find out the name of this. So you want the long attachment for the Prima Vista 1500.
Sorry, the Prima Vista
1500.
1500. Prima Vista 1500 long extension.
Yes, that's what you want.
Okay.
And that will help you with the next few levels. So now, if you press E on your keyboard,
yeah,
the middle section says extension. If you click on that, you can then choose your extension, and it basically just extends your hose, how far it can go.
That's rather cool. Okay.
That'll help you with that as well, because you can direct the pressure a lot easier on the ball.
Can't even get the ball over the step.
You want quite
I need to take a run up
to get it up.
I'm going to take a run up at it. All right. I get it. My football skills, this should be easy. No! Not that easy. Right. And how long did it take you to do this? Remind me?
So the first time I was trying for about 20 minutes and was getting frustrated, so I gave up. And then the second time was just over 10 minutes before I managed to do it.
Ten minutes is my target then.
So basically the best advice I can give is if you kind of get it so that it's over here and you want to try and line it up as straight as you can with the slide.
Oh, as early as that?
Yeah, and then you need to try and get the football like on the edge of this, up on the edge, and then just give it with the red one, give it a good squirt up the slide.
So I've got to use the red one to get it up the slide, okay.
I would use red or yellow for sure.
A bit of yellow, just get a bit more control. To me, to you, to me. Excuse me, sorry. Oh, if I hadn't let go of the button then that would have gone up. Wow, it's going to take me some time. Okay, so I have another question. Because obviously none of these roleplay game events, would you call them events, or? You
can call them events, yeah.
Okay. But they're not. It's not the same story every time, is it? So.
No. Different games, like you. Quite often you can buy kind of like adventures that are written by other people, because some people are not very skilled at or not confident enough to create their own stories.
Yeah.
And different people, like, I mean, I've got quite a lot of friends who run games. Within my little friend group, there's sort of 4 of us. There's sort of about 6 or 7 of us that tend to play on and off, but for RPGs. But there's only 4 of us that run the games usually.
Okay.
And each one of us has kind of like a slightly different way of doing things. Some people like to plan meticulously. I don't like to do that because as a player, I don't like to feel like I like I've got a lot of freedom.
Yeah. You don't want it to be linear. You don't want it to already be decided.
Yeah, that's my problem with running pre-written adventures. I feel very much like it's on a railroad track and people don't have any choice, and that's what me personally, I don't like that. But there's nothing wrong with running those adventures. Like it really does depend upon the person, and I've had some very skilled GMs in the past that have ran different games and ran preset adventures, but have had a lot of skill to be able to let us go, like and sort of explore certain things that aren't necessarily written in the adventure. So say for example, so we're talking like Dungeons and Dragons at the minute. And we'd be walking down the road and we'd see like a ruin, which is completely inconsequential, but we decide that we're going to go and check out the ruin because there might be treasure. And so the GM that was running the game at the time, he had to make up a whole bunch of stuff, what was in the ruin.
On the fly?
Okay. Rather than just say, oh, there's nothing there. You know?
Right, yeah.
And it kind of just sort of comes down, and I think you get more skilled at it the more you do it as well. It's like anything else, you know.
Like this, like trying to get a football up a flipping dinosaur.
And when it comes for planning for me, I do not plan for you can't plan for everything. So for what I personally like to do, I like to have an overall story, like what the game is about, and then when I'm working with a player to create a character, you know, in my personal opinion, each character should kind of have its own story, like its own agenda. You know, every character's got their own agenda and stuff. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Hey, well done. Yeah, he's done it.
Well, I haven't done the whole. I've only got it up the first bit. Oh my god! No! Oh god, that took me forever.
So I personally, I like to kind of have a bit of a storyline going for my characters. And another example, I'm using Spike a lot here, because I've done some really horrible shit to him over the years in role-playing games, to be fair. Quite a few years ago, I was running it was a Viking game, vampire game, but it was set in Viking times. And him and another player decided that they would play brothers. And in every vampire character has a flaw. Like you have to have a negative to your character. It's just the way the character creation works. But I think flawed characters are some of the more interesting anyway. So Spike, when he was creating his character, took a flaw that's called Dark Secret. And I had said to him, the idea for them was that his brother had a betrothed, and she'd been abducted, like she'd been kidnapped, and they had gone looking for her, and the thing that kidnapped her happened to be a vampire, and that's how they kind of came into contact with the world. Okay. So, because every vampire character starts out as a human, and then you get embraced as a vampire, or turned, however you want to put it. And so, Spike took something called Dark Secret, and I'd said to him, what do you want your Dark Secret to be? And he was like, oh, I'm not quite sure. And I was like, do you want some time to think about it, or do you want me to just come up with something? And he was like, oh, you can do it. So I thought about it, for a little while we were doing other things. And then I was like, oh, I've got a really good idea. And I sort of have an internal evil laugh sometimes. And basically, the Dark Secret that I gave to Spike was that him and his brother's betrothed had secretly been in love, and basically they were planning to kind of like run away together.
Nice.
So I can be a bit evil as a GM, but I like to. I don't. For a long time in RPG games, there was a lot of it's the GM versus the player, and I don't enjoy that.
Really? So
Without
like
the
one or
players,
the other
there is no
wins.
game. You know, yeah, exactly. So like you had GMs that would purposely throw really tough stuff at their players to see how they would handle it and stuff like this. But like I can't see the point of making it extremely difficult, because the whole point of this hobby is to have fun. And you need to have fun together, because without a GM there is no game to play, but without the players you've got nobody to help tell this story and run this story, sort of thing. It's a group effort, so you want to I like to use stuff that's kind of like it's a bit juicy, and it throws a bit of intrigue into the game, and and it'll kind of drive the story, sometimes in a good way, sometimes generally it'll drive the story in a good way, but sometimes it's good for the characters, sometimes it's not, because at the end of the day life is about failing. There's something to be said from you learn more from your mistakes than your successes usually in life.
Yeah, that's true.
And I like to kind of use that adage in role-playing games, because if a character fails, it shouldn't be about the failure. It should be what have they learned from that and how can they continue. And like I've seen characters very quickly sometimes change direction from how they were created and how the player thought they were going to go to how they actually end up sort of coming alive during the story. I've had characters myself that have done that. For an example, this is a long time ago now, probably close to a decade ago. I was playing in a game where we created superheroes, and my superhero was called Mirror, and at the start of the game I was a spy for the government on the group, and I betrayed my country for the good of the group in the end.
Okay.
Because they became my friends and I cared about them.
More than your country.
More than my duty.
Interesting.
So, my loyalty switched to them rather than to the country itself. And you can have lots of things that can change. I've had characters that have formed obsessions about other characters. Lots of different things over the years. And I think for me, it keeps it interesting, and like I've run quite a lot of games, sort of from that very first time that I read the vampire book. Like I started off playing in that game, and then when that game was coming to a close, I actually started planning running my own game, which was just a few months later. And then I went to attend that university as a mature student, and I became part of kind of like the group that ran the club, and we used to have, like at freshers and that, we used to have to organize these kind of like sessions for people to come and try out gaming, role playing. And so you would design something that's in the trade is now called a one shot. So it's like a game that'll happen in one session. Now usually when I run one shots, I will design I'll come up with a scenario, and I'll design the characters and give them kind of like the abilities and skills that they'll need during that. It's not going to cover everything, but it's going to cover all the basics, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then I'll give like each
Like a
character
taster.
like a little story.
Yeah.
So they can then try it out and see whether they like it or not. Obviously, I'll give them kind of like tips as to what their character is like, but what they do with it is up to them. Like, I don't sort of say, oh, you're not playing that how I wrote it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's once a person takes on a character, that's their, in my view, that's their character. They can do what they want with it. You know, it's kind of like I try to keep it as basic as possible, so it's kind of like this is the starting point if you've never done this kind of thing before, and you can take it from there. And funny enough, the game that I'm running on Saturday is very similar to that, because I'm running a very short campaign, which should be like 3 sessions, I would say. And so I've like it's another Viking era game, and they're going on an expedition. So I've kind of like designed the characters around the people that are going to be needed for the expedition, the types of people that would go on these things. So like for instance, one of them is one of them's like a smithy, one of them's a carpenter, you know, like that can fix the ship and stuff if the ship gets damaged. You know, different things like that basically. And then for each of them I've given them like a fighting skill, and then in the character notes I've told them their preferred method of fighting when it comes to combat, that kind of thing, you know, and just like any tidbits that's that might be appropriate for the characters. But then how they control those characters and what they do with that information comes down to the player.
But how do you track all that information? Because like you're saying, that it might not be in one session. So how do you keep track of where everything is? That must get...
That's what notes are for, basically.
It's all written down every encounter, or
no,
just your...
No.
Keep track of health
some people do that. Some people have like ready-made encounters and stuff. Myself, like my own, the way that I tend to run games is like I'll think, oh, like this is an encounter that I know is definitely going to happen. This is something that I can come up with. So I always have kind of like statistics for basic adversaries that they may come up against. But there's also in the rulebook for the role-playing game, there's always examples, so that already have statistics. So if you ever kind of run short and you need something, you can always grab something from the book. Or like I'll just think to myself, you know, maybe in my example, you know, they're going to come up against some Native Americans, right? Because they're actually going on an expedition to Finland, which is what they're called, North America. So they're going to run into some Native Americans. So, you know, I'll have some stats for kind of like, you know, Native American brave kind of thing, and all of them will just have the same kind of stats. You know, I'll just make like a basic warrior.
and they'll all
they've
be...
got some bow skills, and they've got some, you know, fighting skills and that. And
Yeah.
then, like, but say they came up against something else, but that was also like that kind of had that warrior feel, I'd just use the same stats. Because
Okay.
at the end of the day, as long as you've got something to roll against, it doesn't really matter. It's more about the telling of the story itself. The encounters can be as complicated. In the werewolf game, where we had Jules and her father was a werewolf, he was actually on the opposite side of the players. There's kind of like factions, and he was in a different faction, and basically he had his own like followers and stuff, and they all had I think there was like 6 or 7 of them total, but I actually only had stats for three things, and that was Jules's father, and then 2 different builds for werewolves, and then I literally used the same stats for You know, I had like 2 of these and 3 of these kind of thing in the fight. And then I just keep track of their health individually. There are like online, so they're called virtual tabletops, where you can play online games. Or you kind of like, if you're playing round a table physically, you can create like character sheets for your NPCs and stuff, for your enemies and that, so that you can easily track that stuff. But usually I'll just kind of like figure out basic stats, give them a health pool, and then I'll just keep track of each one's health as the fight goes on.
Okay. So you keep mentioning the rule book.
Yeah.
Who writes the rule book? Who's
It's created by it's World of Darkness is the company name now. It's gone through a few different names because the license has crossed hands a couple of times. Currently, it's being published by Renegade Game Studios.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
But the system that I'm using, certainly for the vampire games, is Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. For the werewolf game, I was actually using a different edition, which was published by Onyx Path, and that's called Werewolf the Forsaken, the 2nd edition of that. And like, I know the universe that well that I can easily mix and match. Not always the easiest idea for new people to the universe, because there's an awful lot to remember.
It sounds like it.
For an example, I mean, I've run many werewolf games before. I've run many vampire games before. Those tend to be my 2 games. There's a lot of different. I think there's 7 or 8 different game lines in the universe. There might even be more than that. But those are the ones that I tend to enjoy running the most. They're among the most popular ones as well. Certainly Vampire is probably their most popular line. And that's kind of like what started it all as well. Vampire came first, originally. So if I'm running a game of Vampire, even if they come up against werewolves, I don't use the werewolf rule set to give them stats. I use the vampire rules. Because there are examples in... So there's like... there's always a section in the rulebook about running a game and like how to set up encounters and things like that. And it gives you like some example stats, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
So like if they come up against a werewolf, you base all the... Like in the werewolf rulebook, they have completely different powers to vampires. They've got something called gifts, and they work completely mechanically very, very different. But to keep things simple, if I'm running a vampire game and the antagonists are going to be werewolves, I will use vampire powers to emulate what I want the werewolves to do, if that makes sense. So if I want the werewolves to be super strong, there is a vampire discipline that is like supernatural strength. So
right.
I would give them that power.
So that they're not completely overwhelmed, sort of thing.
Yeah, it just makes it a lot easier to track as a GM as well, rather than trying to track 2 different systems in one.
Right.
I mean, I have done that before, but it can become really, really complicated very quickly.
Have you ever had games that, get out of hand, sort of thing? Not like people are behaving badly, but in the sense that, like, the progression of the story goes the wrong way and everyone kind of gets lost, or...
Yes.
Does it... I guess what I'm saying is, does a game ever become... Does it ever reach a point where it can't be recovered?
I suppose it really comes down to kind of how you run the game and how you let the players interact in that world. Some games you know, the plot of the story is really important, and it's kind of, there's a lot of like, if you're new to this kind of thing, or even if you just want to brush up, there's a lot of kind of informational videos out there. You know, YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that is always your friend. And there's a lot of information that people have from various different people that run games and create these, you know, create written adventures or whatever, where they'll give tips to people on how to kind of like steer the players back on track.
Right.
I don't like thinking of it like that. So like,
Sure.
I'll so like my in the werewolf game. So the idea for the werewolf game is that none of the people that played had played werewolf before. Well, sorry, one of them had, but I think we had 5 people and only one person had played it before, besides myself, who was running the game. And so they didn't really understand the world. They'd played vampire before, so they knew the universe, but they didn't understand like the rules of, like, you know, each game line. Like Vampire Society has its own rules, Werewolf Society has its own, you know, like what is considered faux pas culturally and stuff like this. So they don't understand like the mechanics of how the characters work. They don't understand how the game works. So I'd split it into seasons. So the first season was basically about them learning how their character functions in Werewolf Society, like the basics of Werewolf Society, what that means, and them finding their place in the world and getting to grips with their abilities, right? And then the second season was starting to build towards the story. Now, I had planned for 3 seasons overall. The end of season 2 would include the Twin Towers event.
Oh.
And then the third season was going to be cleaning up after that. Because, so in Werewolf, you have, the idea is, for Werewolf, is that they're not like the werewolves that we see in horror movies and stuff where they're tied to the moon. In World of Darkness, a werewolf is a creature that is basically, they are part human, part spirit. They can travel freely, though it takes practice, between the human realm and the spirit realm. And the spirit realm is kind of like a reflection of the human realm, but things take longer to change there. And when there's a big event in the human realm, it can damage the spirit realm, and the spirit realm can leak over, and like things that shouldn't be allowed to kind of exist on the material plane come out. And that's kind of like so in Werewolf the Forsaken, when it comes to kind of like the spiritual realm, literally everything has a counterpart. So everything has like a spiritual what would be the word? So everything that exists in the material world would exist in the shadow realm or the spirit world. So for example, because the game was set in New York City, when they traveled into the spiritual realm, there was lots of everything. It's called the spirit realm because everything's created out of energy. Yeah. So they don't necessarily have a physical form.
Okay.
But they can see and interact, but it uses a type of energy called essence, which the werewolves also need essence to be able to use their spiritual gifts, so their powers, essentially. Their powers are very varied, what they can do. And that's kind of like the complicated bit during character creation for werewolves, because there's a lot of choice. There are a lot of choices to make during.
So I always thought werewolves were quite sort of 2-dimensional. But they're not.
But I think that's kind of like what I like about this universe as werewolves, because they're not two-dimensional.
Right.
The idea is that they are like the guardians between the bad shit in the spiritual realm, and like all spirits kind of like have a job in that realm, but they can become like twisted and corrupted if they start doing stuff that isn't their job. So, for an example, if you were in the middle of a forest and you stepped into the spirit world, you'd be surrounded by like nature spirits. So you'd have like spirits for all the different kind of animals and the different, plants, trees, the sun, the wind, clouds, all that kind of stuff, right? And they can be as sort of abstract as you want them to be. But if a nature spirit, so say you have a nature spirit whose job it is to kind of like control the winds. But say they get tired of doing that job and they decide that they want to basically like run around like a deer. They have the ability to do that, but it changes their very nature. And then as their nature changes, they can then become corrupt and become something else. And then it kind of like breaks the laws of the universe kind of thing. And it can lead to quite nasty consequences of people being possessed and kind of like being controlled or like hurt, sort of hurt and damaged because it can step over into the material world.
So they get what they want, but at the expense of others.
Yeah, basically they kind of like corrupt themselves in doing so. And in some ways, for the spirits themselves, it's kind of like it is a very limited existence, but that's kind of like their job. At least this is how the werewolves see it, okay?
Right.
So the werewolves themselves, or the Garu, as they call themselves, they see themselves kind of like, they're like the police officers of the world. So it's their job to make sure that nothing is out of balance and everything is like doing what it should be doing to keep the world, to keep the mortal realm and the spiritual realm safe from each other. There's a lot of lore involved. There's kind of like a history to how it became this way and things like that. And you don't have to get into that stuff, but you can if you want to. But in the case of what I'd said previously about Spike's character, in him doing that act of murder, he then, because it was so violent and it was so quick, and it actually took place in a relatively what I knew was going to become in the future a place that had a lot of spiritual power. So him doing that act created a murder spirit, and then that spirit then got a bit carried away with what it was meant to be doing, and it started murdering lots of other spirits and gaining power.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it became stronger and stronger and stronger, but it's kind of like a blinkered view from that spirit's perspective. It just wanted to carry on and get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And so it got a bit too ambitious, and it stepped over into the material plane, into the human realm, and possessed a person and drove that person to start killing.
God.
But they were just blindly killing.
Yeah.
It wasn't kind of like, they didn't have a specific MO, it was just murder. It was in any way, shape or form. And so it then becomes the werewolf's job to track them, track it down, and try and sort it out. Which sometimes in they did stakeouts and all sorts of things to kind of like, they had to investigate where this was taking place, and sort of track it down to where it was operating out of, and then kind of like take it down. Depending on depending on how bad how long the spirit has been inside of a person, depends on how much control the spirit has over the person that it's possessing. Sometimes the person can be freed and sometimes they can't, and it had gone beyond the point where it could be, so they actually had to kill the person.
So that comes down to a roll of a dice, that decision, or who makes that decision?
I made that decision as the storyteller, basically.
So depending on your mood on that day, you can be nice or...
I tend to go with what's most appropriate for the story at the time.
I'm with you. You read the players and...
Yeah. Like, as I said, I'm lucky because I've had the same players for a long time. We've played together for many, many years. I know what they like. I know what they enjoy. I know how to keep them on the edge of the seat and to give them stuff that's going to keep them engaged and enjoying the game. And not all of our players are super violent, but the nature of the game of Werewolf is that they're you're basically a killing machine.
Yeah.
Werewolf is going to be a violent game. Just the same as in Vampire. Like, the whole point of this universe is that you are essentially a monster. And it's finding that balance between embracing that nature and kind of like trying to deal with still trying to live, like trying to act like a person. One of the things that I preferred from Werewolf the Forsaken over Werewolf the Apocalypse, which, like I said, it got really complicated because of licensing. They're set in the same world, but they're slightly different mechanically. In Forsaken, the nature of their primal wolf nature is that they want to hunt humans, and if they're not careful, that can basically erase who they are, and that's all they become. And in Vampire, you can become so bestial that you'll just become a mindless killing machine that'll feed, however the hell you want. At which point, Vampire Society would normally step in and have you destroyed, basically, have you hunted down and destroyed, because they don't want the humans to find out about you. And they'll do anything that they need to do to cover up their nature. And Vampire can be very, very brutal. As well, but it's just how you handle it. It's how you deal with it in the story. You can have as much or as I like to have some of that in the story, but it doesn't have to be the overarching thing. I like to give the players a lot of, it's not kind of like, so you've completed this thing, now you have to go here. Then you complete this thing, and then you've got to go here. It's kind of like the story is also, I see it as an interactive story. They're the ones that mostly tell the story. I throw scenarios in the works to sort of keep them on the, I'll set things up, right? And kind of like try to keep things flowing. But it's not really my job to tell them everything what's happening.
Yeah.
Because I've been in games where it is like that, and they can become boring because you just sat around not doing anything.
So they would sit and talk between themselves and decide what they want to do, and then say to you, "We're going to do this," and then you'd facilitate that decision.
What?
Pass the message. Mine cannot get attacked by an enemy player.
He's also on midstream. He's trying to pass a message on to you about naval action. If you would like me to refer it.
Yes, okay.
You can't get attacked by another player in a basic cutter, he's just said.
I wondered if that might be the case. That's interesting. Thank you for the update.
That's okay.
Hey, Mel, could I borrow your jet a minute?
Yeah?
Because, like, this is the closest I've got. I'm desperately keen.
The ball for you is different from the ball for me.
No.
Is over here.
Oh, don't tell me that. I thought I had a perfect solution then.
Aha, no. They've thought of that.
Rascals. Oh, it went up then, a little bit.
What I tried to do is keep the jet pointed close to the bottom of it and kind of inch it up if you can.
To the bottom?
Like the base of the ball.
Okay. Because that makes it spin towards you.
Oh, okay. Like I said, I kind of got lucky. It may also be easier with a more powerful jet later on.
Yeah, I tried to buy an upgrade, but I don't have the...
No, you won't have the money at the moment, but you can always load the level on free play just to do that later on.
I think that's as close as I'm going to get today, isn't it? With this jet. Do you see how I put the step ladders there to help me get it up?
Yeah, I kind of did the same, to be honest. Yeah. I think because obviously I was almost finished the game when the achievements came out. So like I had the most powerful washer.
Right. I think that's what you need, isn't it?
You can't. I actually found it really tough with that washer, and I had to go down to the one up from this. Although, because I was I was getting the ball up the slide okay, but it was shooting out the top like it was going into outer space. So,
oh, does that not get you the achievement?
No, it has to go all the way over. So mine was like going up the slide, but it was going up the slide at such a velocity that it was just shooting out and not going over the slide.
They're evil, these devs, aren't they? So, have you ever had two roleplay games that sort of were similar? Or are they always very, very different?
I've played similar games, yes.
Yeah.
I've also played in the same storyline in multiple games before as well.
In multiple different roles, perhaps.
You know, my character was different in each one, so yeah, but the story was very similar.
So you can learn from that then, you can...
Yeah, I don't... Me personally, because of the way that I play, like I run a game, as I said, like I can't do it with every system. Not every system's as suitable to running more dynamic stories than other systems.
Right.
And that's why I have my favorites. And with the World of Darkness games that I run, they are all very, very different because the story, like the scenario that they're doing, so there'll be like a big story in the city or county or wherever they're playing, and then you know, then like each character kind of has its own little story arc as well. So like usually there'll be things that will come up during the overall story that'll like focus on one character in that story for a little, just for an hour or something like that, you know.
So when you say focus on one player, do you mean from like childhood through?
No. So for in the werewolf game, for example, with Jules and her father, the player that was playing Jules, she she had something coming up in real life where I knew she was going to be away for a session. So the session actually became she was kidnapped, like she was
okay,
and the rest of the group decided to go and save her.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. I like that.
Mm-hmm. And
then, she doesn't feel like she's missed out, and yeah, that works. Yeah. That's clever.
Obviously,
I like that. It's really
I sent her a personal, a personal message, and well, I mean, we discussed it beforehand in chat because I'd had a couple of ideas for her character, I'd sort of said, oh, like, I very, very rarely ever do anything. I'll do things in a way that'll surprise a player, but if I think it's something that needs to be discussed, I'll always discuss it with the player first. And again, this comes the reason that I can get away with not discussing things with my characters sometimes. Sorry, with my players.
Because you know them.
Because they're all my, we're all friends.
Yeah. We've you know them really well.
Again, I know them really well. I know what makes them uncomfortable, and like I know, I've been in games myself that have made me very, very uncomfortable.
Really?
Because I was playing with people I didn't know very well, and they kind of crossed lines.
Is that like a graphical line or like a sexual line or something like that? Could it be anything really?
It's individual to each player, right? Because it's kind of like the whole, it's sort of like the whole mental health thing. Everybody's got different. The biggest thing that's changed in the role-playing community in the last 10 years is talking to your players about the boundaries that they are comfortable with.
Right.
And it never used to be done. It was always kind of like, if a player did something that the GM felt was out of line, it was their kind of job to sort of tell them, that's enough, sort of thing, or whatever, right? But some GMs are not confident enough or comfortable enough to do that. And we've had this situation occur. And like, I've been through some quite traumatic experiences in life, and I do have long-term PTSD.
Right. The stuff that triggers that is obviously...
Stuff happened in the game that basically triggered my PTSD, and I outrightly said, like, please can we stop doing this because it's making me uncomfortable. Got ignored, and the people carried on. GM felt completely out of control and didn't really know what to do and how to handle the situation.
Yeah.
And the situation devolved into, I've got to stop playing because I cannot handle this. I'm literally having a meltdown. I then had nightmares about, it totally triggered my PTSD.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had like ongoing nightmares about what had happened, and basically trying to handle it like a grown-up. I was trying to talk to these people to make sure that it didn't happen again. And it was kind of like I was ridiculed, and it's like, oh, it's only a game, you shouldn't be getting that upset. But you don't know what people's circumstances are in life, and if people have been traumatic events, you don't know what's going to trigger somebody and what's not. So I think it's become a general practice in the roleplay community to kind of like, before a game starts, for a GM to have a discussion with their individually with their players. They call it lines and veils a lot of the time, and it's kind of like, where do people draw the line? And if there's something that they don't want to see. So like I said before, like I play games that do have violence in them, but you can say that something is happening violently. It's kind of like, oh, it devolves into extreme violence. You don't have to go into graphic detail.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's finding out what people are comfortable with and making sure you stick to that. There's also a system to back that up, which is called the X system. It's very well known in the roleplay system. in the roleplay world nowadays, and that all it means is that if during a session, if something is making you feel really uncomfortable, there's like, if you're playing around a table, usually there's a card that you can hold up, or you just, for us, because we mostly play online because our players are very spread out, basically you type like an X into the chat channel of the game, or into the chat channel of Discord if we're running it through Discord, and basically the scene will come to a close, no questions asked.
Right. Wow. There's so much more to it than I ever realised. The only time I ever tried to do anything remotely similar to what you're doing was a friend of mine, when we were at school, invited me round to play Dungeons and Dragons. And he had like a board set up on the table, and we were going through. But I'd never seen anything like it. I didn't understand it. I just totally didn't get it. I was like, I'm so confused by everything. And I never sort of stepped into it ever again.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming as well, because like, I think that's why I always like to try and design, you know, if I've got new players, I always like to try and design like a taste. Like if somebody's like, oh, I'd really like to try that, but I don't know where to start, I'll design like a taster game, and it'll kind of give you a taste of what it's like and everything, but it won't go into nowhere near as much depth and detail as like I prefer to do with my characters, because I love when players are kind of like, oh, I've got this idea for a character, and kind of like I've got this whole, you know, background, and I know everything about this, or not everything, but I know all this stuff about the character. The first character that I ever created, I turned up with like a 20-page story. That's me. Not everybody has the ability to do that, and I totally understand that, and I have no problem with people that can't. But I usually, I've worked with a lot of people that are not skilled that way over the years, and they can still come up with some really, really good ideas. It's just kind of like encouraging them to explore that, you know? And it's kind of like, if you've never done that, you're not going to have the skills to do it. You've never done it before. How the heck are you going to know what to do, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like, you know, whenever, and even people that I've played games with for a long time, sometimes during character creation, like they'll be like, oh, I want to do I want to do this with my character, but I haven't fully fleshed out the idea, and I can't think of a way to do it. You know, and I'll have a little chat with them and make some suggestions, and sometimes that'll be like, oh, I really like that idea, or it'll spark an idea. Yeah. You know, and there's nothing wrong with, like, for me, role-playing is kind of like, it should be about having fun, exploring yourself and social interactions in a kind of safe way. And like I've dealt with in other games, I've dealt with some of the things that like some of the trauma that I've had suffered in real life, and it's helped me come to terms with it. And I know there's at least one very famous role player. She does a lot of streaming stuff, and she spoke about this in interviews before, and it's the same for her. She's found a safe environment where she can explore like the feelings and everything that the traumas come, and it's helped her heal in this way. You know, so
it is interesting,
yeah. it can be used for great good, but I have no disillusions in the fact that at the end of the day, it's a game and it's about having fun. And yeah, sometimes you can deal with some very heavy subject matter. Sometimes it doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes it can be very light-hearted and fun. And I think it's one of those tools that you can really use in whichever way you and your players are comfortable with, to sort of, you know, to grow and have fun together, and also as individuals. and it's one of those things. And sometimes you can explore things in that way that you would never ever do in life. You know, I've had games where I've ran games with some pretty evil characters. I played in a werewolf game a long time ago now, and I played a complete and utter cow, to be a polite way. I manipulated everybody in my group. So there's a mechanic in werewolf where there's got to be the leader of the pack, right? And sometimes, like, you'll have characters that are more natural leaders than others. Some players are more natural leaders than others, just like in life. And in that instance, my character really wanted to be leader of the pack. She was very ambitious, but not particularly, didn't really give a shit how she got that power.
Right. Okay.
But there was somebody else in the pack that also wanted to be leader of the pack. And basically it came down to a physical fight, and he was better than her, and she got beaten. So over the length of the game, there was opportunities. His character then, like, really disliked my character, and so he would send me off to do things where I was kind of like out of, you know, he assumed that I was doing his orders, but he like kept me out of his sight, kind of thing.
Right.
But it also gave my character the opportunity to undermine his power. And basically, over the time of the game, so over many sessions, I actually built a paper trail which proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he'd betrayed not only the pack, but the whole werewolf society. And when the time was right, I strung the trap, and he got hung.
Okay, so even if there are, say, 4 of you in a group...
You've known me long enough now in gaming. You see how I am. I'm not like that. I'll do anything to help anybody, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm not that kind of person. But it was fun to explore that.
Yeah.
You know, from
playing that role.
Because the guy who was like my adversary in that game, we were actually really good friends, and so it was like, you know, it's sometimes fun to do that in a game, but it's also worth, if you are doing that in the game, if you're having, you know, if you are at odds with one of the other players in the game, it's also very important to make sure that they know that it's not personal, and to make sure that it's okay, like that you guys are okay, and then you're not pushing the boundaries too far, you know. And
so yeah, I was going to say, like,
really fun to be pretty nasty and evil sometimes.
Yeah. So,
you know,
like, if you're playing with the kids or whatever, generally you stay away from deliberately being mean to one of the other players. But within the realms of the role play environment, it's okay to even kill off other players, like completely out of the game, or does that never happen?
Like, it does happen.
Oh, so it does happen.
The
Okay.
person that I was just mentioning, in another game, he caused my character's death as well, and it was always kind of like, I'm so sorry, like, I didn't mean for that to, like, you know, to sort of, in that case, it happened, and it wasn't pre-planned, it just happened.
Right.
He'd built a massive security system. My character was new. I didn't know anything about the security system. I triggered it, and none of the guys were actually there to turn the security system off, and it led to my character dying.
So what happens in that situation? Do you get a new character, or is that it? You're just out?
I created a new character, yeah.
Okay.
That kind of comes down to sort of you and the GM and how you're going to handle that.
Right.
Because he could have easily have said, you know...
you're done. Off you go.
I mean, there was a moment where I was like, I can't believe that this has happened, and like, oh my gosh. And it was like, you know, the player was kind of like, oh well. But, you know, we chatted about it afterwards, and he was like, I'm so sorry, like, I didn't mean for that to happen. My character wouldn't care that it happened because he'd never even met you. But me as a player, I care about you, and I'm really sorry. But it's just, you know, and it turns into kind of like, it's one of those funny stories, you know.
About not losing sight of, the real world sort of thing as well.
In the years that I've been playing, the very first game that I played in, another close friend who was a close friend for many years, his character still has one of the funniest character deaths to me that I've ever experienced in a game.
Well, I've got to hear about this.
Okay, so it was Vampire the Masquerade was the game.
Okay.
Now, they're not like the vampires on TV. They've got their own rules, of course. So how the differences are that in Vampire the Masquerade, they're not immortal. Like, they don't age and die, but they can be killed, given enough damage. Now, they're a lot more tougher than standard humans, so kind of like, guns and what have you don't hurt them as much as it would a normal human.
Right.
However, they do take extensive damage from fire, and in that particular edition, also electricity. And he was... it was the end of the night, per se, and all vampires have to find a safe place to sleep during the day, because you do burn up in the sun.
I'm with you, yeah.
And he'd got a taxi back to his haven, so like his safe, place, whatever, during the day. But on the way back, like, he realised that he was hungry, and so the GM had said to him, you've realised you're hungry, and the player went, "Oh, I'll feed on the taxi driver." But that's all he said. He didn't specify anything, right? So the GM was like, "Okay," you lean forward in the car, you basically grab onto the taxi driver's head and sink your fangs into his neck while the guy is driving, right? The taxi then crashed, of course.
See, now that shows the skill of the GM, right? I'm guessing. Yeah, okay.
The taxi then crashed. It was one of those things, sometimes players don't think and they do stupid things. If they're about to do a stupid thing that's going to lead to their desk, I'll always ask them, are you sure that's what you want to do? And sometimes I'll ask them that just to make them nervous anyway, because I don't want to be totally predictable, right? But I always try to make sure, are you sure? Sort of thing. Anyway, so this guy, the taxi had crashed, and he was like, "Oh, shit, I've got to get away from here." So he got out of the taxi and started running down the street towards a sewer grate. But he was leaving bloody footprints on the floor, because of course, he basically bit this guy's jugular open, so there was blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And the GM was like, you look behind you and you see like bloody footprints on the floor. So he sort of panicked and he went, "Shit." So he ran back to the taxi, got back in the taxi, and basically sat in the taxi and played dead. Right? So vampires don't breathe, they don't have heartbeats in this system. Okay. So they crashed quite close to where the city hospital was. So the emergency workers got there. The taxi driver was still alive, but only barely. And then they checked him and they were like, "This one's dead." So they started trying to resuscitate him. So they intubated him, which meant he couldn't talk. And so when they intubated him and they started taking him into the hospital, he started trying to fight to get away. And they were like, "Oh, he's resisting us. He's kind of like trying to come back to, basically they sedated him."
Right.
Which doesn't work quite the same. It's not as powerful as it is with humans. Vampires can sort of resist it to a certain extent. And he was like, "No. And they were like, "He's got no heartbeat." So they started using the defibrillator on him, so he started taking damage. Now, when vampires get too damaged in the system, they go into a death-like sleep called torpor.
Okay.
So that's basically what happened. He took too much damage, he went into torpor, so he was basically like unconscious, but of course he's not breathing, he doesn't have a heartbeat. So the humans thought he was dead, so they sent him to the morgue, and then like the next day they basically performed an autopsy on him and he died.
Wow.
So it's still, but this took place over about a 30-minute window in the game because there was lots of dice rolls to, you know, to see outcomes and stuff like this.
So
But, like, oh,
at each of those,
funny.
at each of those sort of moments where this could happen or this could happen,
Yes.
that's when you
It's kind
throw a
of like
dice.
when he's trying to fight to get up, for example, you then roll. You know, you roll the dice, and some different systems handle different dice rolls slightly differently. In the World of Darkness, if you're working against somebody, it's usually whether that's a player or a non-player character. There's generally an opposed roll, so whoever gets the most successes.
Right.
You basically roll your character sheet is based on dots, so the amount of dots that you have in something determines your skill in whatever that is.
Those
and
3
then
dots of strength, or
So example, when you're creating a character, you have like different dots to assign. You have a certain amount of dots to assign to like attributes and stuff like that. So, for example, if you're like trying to get out of a grapple, or you're trying to get up from being restrained, you would make a strength. It depends on whether you're fighting or whether you're just kind of struggling. So it could be strength and athletics, or it could be strength and brawl. So what you do is you add those number of dots together, and that's how many dice you roll. And then there's like basically a 6 and above on a D10 is so that's a 10-sided dice.
right.
is considered a success. But if you're acting like if he was just restrained to the gurney with like belts, if he was strapped down, he would make a roll and he'd have to get so many successes to succeed.
Right.
Depending upon how difficult the GM thought the situation was to get out of. If there's other people involved, like I said, whether that's another player or just another, an NPC, it becomes an opposed roll. So they would roll to hold him down, and whoever got the most successes is the winner.
That makes sense.
So yeah.
How many dice could you end up using?
It can get quite big depending upon, because you can have modifiers as well that would give you extra dice. Generally that only goes up to like an extra 2, sometimes an extra 3 dice. And most stats go between like 0 and 5, essentially. So generally speaking, the most amount of dice that you'll ever roll is like 13. But I've played games where they were fighting like mythical monsters and stuff, and I've rolled like 20 odd dice.
Wow.
I usually always roll really badly when I'm rolling. Like when I'm rolling to kind of like attack my players and hurt my players, I always roll bad.
I guess that's not intentionally, that's just...
No, it's just the look of the dice. Years and years ago, we did the first time I ever ran a Viking game. It was during exam season, and it was just like, we just want something that's kind of light-hearted and fun, that we can like not really worry about the consequences of what our character's going to have to live with, and we're going to have to like think about things too much. So I ran a campaign that was based upon the 13th Warrior movie.
I haven't seen that, but I know of it, yeah.
Well, they think that tale, because it's based on a true writing by one of the character that Antonio Banderas plays, is
Right.
based upon a real person. And he was a Muslim who spent some time with Vikings, and he wrote a lot of stuff down, and they think that's where the story of Beowulf comes from originally.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Michael Crichton, obviously, he wrote a fictionalized version called The Eaters of the Dead, and that's what the movie is based on. But essentially,
know that.
they choose 13 warriors to a ship arrives in the night with a messenger boy who's basically a king from one of the other nations is asking for help because his people are being plagued by an unnamed terror. It's basically like something really bad that the people won't give a name to. And kind of like in Viking mythology, there's a couple of things like that that they wouldn't name, but everybody kind of knew the sorts of things that it was. Because there's some really, really dark stuff in Viking mythology.
Okay.
It's where a lot of the dark stuff comes from in Tolkien. That's where he got his ideas from. But yeah, so there's kind of like a big meeting where they're all sort of, sat around talking and stuff, and they call in a seer, so kind of like what we would refer to as a witch, and to kind of prophesize what would give them the best chance of success. And she basically says that they need to send 13 warriors to go to this land. So then there's people standing up and volunteering, and they're like calling for different warriors, and it comes to the 13th warrior, and this Arab gets chosen to be the 13th warrior.
Okay.
And obviously he goes with them, but he can't speak the language or anything like that. He learns, of course, but it's kind of all part of the journey. And they sail to this other land, and basically they're being terrorized by these unknown horrors, but it happens to be a group of cannibals that have moved into the area.
Right. I'm gonna have to watch this film.
It's a great movie. Great movie. Yeah, so like there's they get there, and like the town's all run down, and there's no defenses and kind of all this stuff, so they help like build a fence, and they help like build a kind of like a palisade wall, and stuff like this to kind of defend the town a bit better and everything. But it's kind of like the adventures that happen, and then at the end they go into these caves where the cannibals are hiding out, because they only ever attack at night. They're like run by they've got like a matriarchal figurehead that gets referred to as the mother, and they end up like having to fight her, basically, to kind of like, it's kind of like cutting the head off the snake, to sort of try and stop the attacks happening. So I kind of did that story, but a little bit of a twist. So instead of being a cannibal, the thing that was kind of like running the opposite army was a skin changer, and there was something called a 𝗦𝘂𝗯𝘀, which are basically they're kind of like werewolves, but they're lizards, and their ancient forms used to be that of dragons, and I thought it was quite fitting Viking mythology and dragons, because they did believe in dragons and stuff. So
they did or didn't?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, 𝗬𝗂𝗏. That's where the word worm comes from. It's the Viking word is 𝗬𝗏. Basically that's kind of what they were fighting. So when they were fighting the dragon at the end, it kind of had like a fire breathing attack. And I rolled like something like 27 dice to attack, and I think I only got like 4 successes or something crazy like that. Wow. So I always roll really bad, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I don't want to kill my players off. They can get damaged, and they can have some quite nasty scars and stuff, but I don't want to kill them.
Yeah, kind of ruins the game a bit, I guess.
Yeah, it always puts a damper on the game when you lose a character. I mean, sometimes it can happen in a very funny fashion, but if something like I said, I tend to, if people are about to make a decision that could potentially lead to the death, I'll always sort of ask them. I did run one game where I purposely killed all of the characters, and everybody absolutely flipping hated it. But it was part of a series of games, and then it was like the end of the year, and the next year I was going to start the game, because what happened was they actually walked through a gateway into Arcadia, the fairy realm, so they were actually all asleep and they dreamt it all. But they didn't realise that.
Wow.
And it really did put a damper on the game. I kind of had to tell them all, because they were all so upset. And I was like, I haven't actually really killed you. None of you are dead. None of you are even hurt. It's all in your mind. You basically had a mass hallucination.
Bit of a mind trip sort of thing.
Yeah. So
what's the longest a game has ever gone on then? You say 3 sessions. Is that sort of...
No, I've ran the same game with the same characters for 3 years. That's the longest I've ran the same game. Yes.
3 years.
Yeah.
Good God, that's a huge chunk of time.
Yep. The whole of my university, like the whole of my degree life, I didn't do it every week or anything like that. So I used to run a game every week, but every term we would switch games. So my games used to run. Most of the guys that we had playing would stay over the summer. So it would be like in the term and then in the summertime, and then a term and then the summertime. So it kind of would run for about 6 months a year, and that was weekly games.
Still, that must have been exhausting whilst also studying.
It's a lot of fun. It's just like any other hobby, you know.
Suppose.
There's plenty of people who, you know, they did sports and I've never been a sporty person, really. I can do it, I just don't enjoy it. So, well, I can't do it anymore, but I used to be able to. I used to be good at basketball and football and stuff.
So have you ever been involved in, or would you ever be involved in, or does it even exist, a game where it's not sort of fantasy, but I don't know, for argument's sake, a World War II based sort of thing? Does that happen, or is it always they do happen as well?
There are systems out there for. You must have heard of Cthulhu by now, right? H.P. Lovecraft as an author.
No.
Okay, so he's an author, a horror author in the 20s that wrote some really weird and wonderful fiction. Okay. It exists in many, many forms these days. There's games, there's computer games, there's like board games, there's card games, there's all sorts that involves the Cthulhu mythos. So that's one game. But there's also another version of there's several types of games that involve Cthulhu mythos. They're just like weird and wonderful monsters, right? And there's one that's set. So you know how in World War II, how the Nazis did loads of like occult research sort of thing. So like Hellboy, you know. Yeah. There's games that are like that, but you can just do roleplay games set in World War II and stuff if you wanted. For any setting that you can think of, there's a role-playing game, I can guarantee it.
So this is pre-scripted.
We've done like Conan the Barbarian style games, we've done superheroes, past, present and future, all sorts of things we've done.
So there's really a lot more to it than I realised, I have to say.
Yeah. Like most people's, it's becoming less common, but it used to be quite common that most people's brush with roleplay was like Dungeons and Dragons. And there's nothing wrong with Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah. And
I would say that with just about any system, you know, everybody's different and everybody enjoys different things.
100%,
and therefore, like we also, Spike runs a game, which is like a pirate game that's running like, it's like a fantasy version of the Age of Sail, where we basically play pirates.
Cool.
And
See, now that I could get behind, I reckon.
that uses a different system. It's similar to D&D, but it's called Pathfinder.
But how are these systems different? Because I mean, I assume they all use dice.
Mm-hmm.
So what? When you say mechanically, what do you mean by?
So sometimes, like some, he's trying to bury his food. Yeah. It's a minor thing. So like, Dungeons and Dragons kind of has its own way. Every system, doesn't really matter which game it is, has their own way of creating a character. Now, like Vampire the Masquerade is not the only game in which you play vampires. There are other ones as well. GURPS Vampires, for instance. There's I can't think of his name. Monty somebody. But there's a few different ones. It just kind of depends on what you want out of the game. And each like system per se has its own sort of rules that you use to kind of like give your character statistics, and also like I say, you tend to roll for kind of like dramatically important things.
Yeah.
Some GMs roll for pretty much everything, but it's kind of like if you walk into a room and you know you're going to walk into a room. So say you're meeting with somebody that for kind of like a shady deal or something like that. When you go in that room, you're automatically going to look around because you're like, you know that you're going into a bit of a dodgy situation, and what idiot isn't going to like look to see how many people are in the room, where the exits are.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like,
yeah.
I would only get, me personally, I would only get people to roll to spot something that's like unusual, like a concealed weapon or a hidden door, stuff like that.
Okay.
Rather than just kind of like, oh, you roll, this is how many people you see in the room. But there are people that do that. And I think sometimes that comes down to experience as well as a GM.
I can see that, because as you were explaining it, I didn't expect you to go in the direction of a concealed weapon, but as soon as you did, I'm like, oh, that's clever. Yeah, I see how that works.
Mm-hmm. So like, it just sort of depends, and like, it's one of those things. Like I've got someone who, like, well, we're friends, and then she went off to university to study as a mature student again, and somebody at her university decided to run Vampire the Masquerade. Now, like, she'd always played Vampire the Masquerade with me running the game, and she'd also tried, had a go at running her own game, and she was absolutely fine at doing it. But she decided, because somebody else was really interested in it, she would rather play than run. She was going to run it, but when somebody else said, oh, I really want to run that, she was kind of like, okay, well, I'm happy to play. But basically, he threw away the rule book completely. And it's fine to kind of tailor make the rules to kind of like what works for your group. So like, some rules might not work and some do. But you can't throw away everything, because it ceases to be that game. And I think... Can
you give me an example of a rule, like maybe a couple of rules?
So, for example, in the case of Vampire the Masquerade, vampires burn in the sun.
Right.
If vampires don't burn in the sun, there's no consequences of being a vampire.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, you know how Twilight went through its phase of being extremely popular?
Yeah.
Like, my biggest problem with Twilight's vampires is and I said this to a friend of mine. No, it's not that they're out of the day. I can accept the way that she did that, and there's plenty of other games where there's Daywalker's Blade, and there's other systems where that you have like vampires, which are like half vampires and stuff. Depends on which folklore you're kind of following.
Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, Vampire Diaries with the rings. Then you've got like stuff like the strain, which the sun has no effect on them, things like that. So there's as many different types of vampires as there are zombies, you know. But my problem with like the Twilight vampires is that they're virtually indestructible. They can go out in the daylight, and most of the time, unless they're in direct sunlight, they can pass for human. And kind of like they're too, in inverted commas, easy to be vampires. Like there's no real big consequence other than the hunger. But they can survive on animal blood, so they don't have to kill. You know, and it's kind of like, if you're going to be something like that, then there's got to be, to me, it makes it more interesting. You don't have to have it, but it makes it more interesting if there's consequences to being that. You can be this all-powerful, you know, super strong, super fast being, but there's got to be some sort of control. Otherwise, what's to stop a player from doing whatever the hell they like and basically becoming a god in the game? Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. you could walk into a village, say you're playing in like a sort of a Dark Ages setting, or you know, something like that. You could walk into a village and show off these powers, and the people aren't necessarily going to think, oh my gosh, you're a vampire, I've got to kill you because you're going to feed on us. It might be a case of, you're a god and we can worship you and we can bring you all this stuff.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, there's got to be adversity to make a character interesting, to make a game interesting. Because if you've got everything on your lap as a silver on a silver platter, what's the point in playing?
Yeah, I understand that.
That's my opinion, you know.
So, I mean, you could tweak those rules, I guess, to make it harder or easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As well.
Yeah. See, one of the things that they've always put in the World of Darkness games is the number one rule is there are no rules. As in, if something doesn't work for you, oops.
I just timed out. Whoops.
That's okay. If something doesn't work for you, then don't, you know, change it. Use it in a different way, or ignore it. And I think for I've played in some systems which are extremely rules heavy, and sometimes it does distract from the fun of the game.
Yeah.
I also know like other people that really, really enjoy that type of system. And again, everybody's an individual, so everybody's going to enjoy different things, and it's kind of about finding that balance with a like-minded group of people for what you do enjoy. We've played very rules light systems. We've played games that are more rules heavy, and that just tends to be the system itself. And like, you can adapt most systems to what you want. It's just how much work do you want to put in, you know? And there's plenty of rule system out there where they give you like a basic framework, and then you can adapt that to whatever setting you want to play using that framework. GURPS is one of those systems. Savage Worlds is another system that's like that. There was a generic D20 system that was used in the early 2000s that was very similar to that.
Is that a 20-sided dice?
Yes.
Wow. That must be big, right?
Not as big as you would think.
Interesting.
And
are you rejoining, by the way?
Let me see if I can do that through. There we go. Yes, I was just waiting for the to go ahead.
Cool.
My took the battle willing, very, very shit. I've taken screenshots and I'm running for my life.
Spike's just been sucked into a battle with a whole bunch of really big ships and he's running for his life.
Wow. Good luck, mate. Good luck.
Mike says good luck.
I'm running, man. I'm running. I'm getting out of here. I've got 5 minutes to get the hell out of here. Look at the size of that freaking thing. Guy 3 on 1 it. Like, yeah, I'm out of here. Easy. Luck with that. My passengers that are going to Grand Turk.
He's got passengers on board at the minute too.
In his barrels. Yeah.
What is excitement? Not that much excitement.
You like the 𝐤𝐕𝐈𝐄𝐳? Well,
Yeah, I don't mind it. I used to play Port Royale games a lot.
oh yeah, yeah.
Sid Meier's Pirates back in the day was one of my favourites.
Oh yeah,
Played that
that's a good game.
extensively. That was a great game. I loved the dancing and that was hilarious.
Oh, with the young ladies, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and there was an MMO years ago, like Pirates of the Burning Sea. Yeah, I used to play that a lot.
Oh, I've not heard of that.
It was a good game. There were some balancing issues at first, but I think, you know, whenever there's a new style of MMO come out, the balancing is always kind of like one of the trickiest parts to get right.
Absolutely.
Because the more people that you have playing, essentially, the easier it becomes over time to kind of like balance it properly. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and then there was a really small game, which is quite old now, but it still has a very fond place in my heart called Windward. And
Oh, that rings a
really,
bell. I don't know why.
I love that game. It's dead cute. Yeah, it's really cheap and it's a lot of fun.
Probably not the game I'm thinking of.
So you're in a ship. It's top-down view, so it's the graphics are very similar to kind of like how Age of Empires used to be in that.
Yeah.
But it's like a top-down game, and you can do ship combat. You can trade, and like you capture ports, explore. You kind of like you choose a faction at the start of the game, like you do in a lot of those games, and then you can kind of like run different missions for. So you'll start on a particular. The maps are like multiple grid squares.
Right.
I used to enjoy making the maps for them as well. I think you can make them quite challenging depending on how you build them. And it wasn't very time consuming to make maps for them either. Yeah, so you would start off like on your square, there'd be so many towns to find out. You start in one particular port, and you can take quests to like, you know, there's different types of quests. So sometimes it's like deliver this to another port, or like pick up this and bring it back, you know, that kind of thing.
Sounds a lot like naval action right now.
It's very similar in that respect. It's just the graphics were very different, and you can play it PvE or PvP, or a bit of both. Because you can, like, if you're playing with your friends, you can all be in the same faction, or you can be in different factions and have some warfare.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very easy to set your own server as well. So we've played it a lot. Yeah, I already said that. And then like the more missions that you do out of any particular port, the stronger that port will get. Like, you know, it'll kind of become more advanced. So it'll get like higher tier buildings and things like that. But it'll also require more goods.
Yeah. It does sound an awful lot like naval combat. Sorry, naval action rather.
Yep. Very cute.
Whatever happened to that game then? Did it just die out? Get old?
Well, no. I mean, it was around for a lot. How long do you reckon Windward's been out now? Like 9 years or so, something like that. The game developer went on and developed something else that's quite similar to No Man's Sky.
All right.
Yeah, it's just over £7 for the game.
Well, it's still about, is it? It's on Steam.
Yeah, it's on Steam.
7-year-old.
Okay.
It's 7 years old. It was released in 2015.
Let's have a look at that.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I don't think I'd probably be alright playing naval action. I don't think I'd hate it. I mean, back in the day when I was a PvP player, the reason that I don't do PvP anymore is because my reactions are really bad compared to like how they used to be before I had the health problems that I have now, and I tend to get frustrated most of the time, and then it just ends up to me not enjoying the game. So I'm kind of like, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm just wasting my time.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I was in the top 50 in the world in Unreal Tournament days.
You know, that's one game I never played, and I know people sing and dance about that game. Yeah,
really great game.
Never played it. Never once played that game.
I got quite well renowned. I used to snipe a lot on the game.
Sounds like me on Halo.
And there was a couple of maps where basically I was almost unbeatable. So like, basically when the game started and people would look, they'd look at the scoreboard to see who was playing, and if they saw my name, I'd sometimes even have my own teammates trying to like get me killed and stuff.
Nice.
Because I've been in situations where like I had 200 more kills than anybody else in the game and stuff like that.
God.
Those were fun times. With dial-up.
Dial-up.
Yeah. Start a new game would take like 10 minutes to get into the match or something.
Still, back then people didn't mind so much, did they?
Well, it was normal, wasn't it? So.
Can you imagine that now? The kids of today?
No
My
way.
word.
I mean, my very first computer was a ZX Spectrum, with the tape deck, the cassette deck. So you put the cassette, you put the cassette on to load your game up and like go do something else for 20 minutes, Oh dear.
I remember my Commodore 64 with the tape deck.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'd wait for an hour for a game to load and then realise that it had just missed something and you have to start again.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days. I still have mine.
No way, do you really?
Yeah, and it's in my mum's loft in the box. Like my mum's got a converted loft, but it's in the loft in its original box.
Wow,
with the joystick and a bunch of
so
games.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Are you keeping that for nostalgia or is it an investment now?
I don't know. I just never got around to doing anything with it.
Really wish I still had my Amiga and my...
Amigas were great.
Yeah.
See, I never ever had a Commodore. Myself, I only had the ZX Spectrum, but one of my first like real long-term relationships. The guy that I was, well, it's the first time I like lived with somebody. He had an Amiga. He was an Amiga and an Atari guy.
I never had an Atari.
It wasn't bad
Yeah.
either. That was the
Love
first
my
time I ever
Amiga.
played 𝐬𝐬𝗎𝗓. Was on Atari. And then I was with him when I got my first PC, and I used to play Command and Conquer nearly all the time.
Oh, Command and Conquer. Man alive.
Command and Conquer Red Alert was one of my favourite games for a long time. I loved that game. Played
So
it.
good, wasn't it? The cutscenes. Who was the actor who did the...
Oh,
Quite famous, wasn't he? I can't remember who he was.
I know 𝗦𝘂�00𝗬𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Ironside, wasn't it? And as one of the generals.
Maybe that's who I'm thinking of. Google
Well,
that. Hang on.
there was a couple. Trying to think who it was. There was. I remember him, but there was a couple of famous people in it.
Oh, Michael Ironside. It was Michael Ironside, yeah. Yes. I don't know him by name, but I know him by face.
Yeah, he was on the side where you had the was it the hand and nod or whatever it was called?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on that side. That was my favourite side, actually. I quite enjoyed it.
So many stories linked to that game, I tell you.
Mhm. Yeah. So my first, like, because when I bought my first PC, it came with a pack of 3 games, and I had a little bit of choice. I got Civilization 2.
Oh, that's a great game.
Tomb Raider, the original Tomb Raider, and Command & Conquer Red Alert.
Good choices, I'd say.
I played Red Alert before I played Command & Conquer.
I played Red Alert before I played Tiberian Sun as well.
Oh, Tiberian Sun, yeah.
When Tiberian Sun came out, it made me. I always thought Tiberian Sun was very Dune-like.
Yes.
I agree.
You know? It was called different things, but it was the same sort of thing.
Yes,
do you remember?
agree.
I know there's a new Dune game coming out, but do you remember the one that used to be out where you had to? And it was similar style to Command and Conquer. I forgot what that was called. That was quite good as well. And then I got into things like Pharaoh, city building games. That's actually being re-released in a new format.
I don't think I played that. I'm sure I heard of it.
It obviously was just an Egyptian-themed building games. Age of Mythology I played a lot.
Oh man, I used to love that game.
Yeah, Age of Mythology was great. Used to play tons of those style of games.
I think they were the best games back then, weren't they?
They've got an awful lot of nostalgia for me, so they were among my favourites. Yeah, like I enjoyed Tomb Raider, but I used to get frustrated with it sometimes. I've never been great at the whole platform thing. I'm not good at jumping. Okay. Duke Nukem I played a lot of, followed by Shadow Warrior. That was hilarious. But yeah, then when the original Unreal game came out, I played that a lot, and then when Unreal Tournament came out, I played that a lot as well. I've been gaming most of my life, so I think I got my first computer game when I was about 8.
That's kind of cool because, like, back when I was a kid, I don't think any of the girls at my school played games, or if they did, they certainly
No.
didn't tell me about it.
Well, I mean, I have been the only female gamer in the group for a long time. Like, even when I first started role playing, when I very first started, there was only me and one other girl, and about 20 guys. And the guy that I ended up, who became my adversary in that werewolf game, he was one of those painfully shy, couldn't talk to girls kind of guys. And me and the other girl, we used to we used to wind him up. We were mean. We would sit like either side of him to kind of like encourage him, like try and encourage him. But I know it made him feel uncomfortable a lot, probably at first. But he did come out of his shell eventually and everything.
Cruel to be kind.
Yeah, yeah.
So being a girl gamer back in the day, you must have, because like I remember distinctly playing games back in the day, and like a girl would be in a team, and we'd be like, "Oh my god, there's a girl," and we'd all just go and talk to the girl, and
Yep.
So you've had all that stuff.
And it's kind of funny because I've played World of Warcraft for a lot of years, and for a lot of years I always played female characters, but people always thought I was a guy, like always. And when they found out that I was a girl, a lot of the times it was like, "Oh my gosh, you're really a girl!" Like,
yeah.
Go
Flip side of that
exist. I mean, it's a lot more common nowadays. But
yeah, now it's normal, you know.
yeah.
Well, I say it's normal. I was talking to my brother a couple of weeks back, and he told me that his he's not his fiance, but might as well be. She's like a lifelong gamer, and I was like, oh my god! Like, it's for some reason it's still a shock to me. I don't know why. Inherent from my childhood.
Well, I was going to say, I think for us though, for the longest time, it was really unusual.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I like growing up, I was the biggest tomboy anyway. Like all my friends were, well, for a long time, most of my friends were boys. I didn't really get along with girls very well. I always found them too bitchy.
Right.
And then like I went through a period where kind of like, you know, puberty starts to happen, and then all the boys don't want to hang out with you anymore, and that hurt me a lot. And then I went on to have like more female friends after that and stuff. But
Okay.
I was one of those kids where I was kind of like, I can't see why I can't be your friend because I'm a girl.
Yeah.
You know.
You were like a girl today.
Yeah.
But back then, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah.
I didn't word that very well. I'm glad you filled in the gaps.
No, but like I don't think I'm really that much, like, I'm more outspoken than I used to be. I used to be incredibly shy when I was at school and stuff.
Right.
And so like I'm more outspoken, and I've got past the point where I'm like, I'll try to be something that I'm not. But yeah, you know, like when you first meet other people, it's kind of like, this is how I am, and if you don't like me, that's fair enough.
Absolutely. Well, it should be.
It took me, as a child, it took me quite a long, well, as a young person, it took me quite a long time to kind of realize that it's not about being what other people think you should be. Just be who you are, you know.
That's such an important lesson. I think they should teach that in schools.
Yeah,
you know,
like I always try to I try to teach our kids that, and it's kind of like, look, there'll always be people in your life that don't like you, and the people,
no matter how much you try or how nice you are.
Exactly. If you're just yourself, you will eventually make good friends that have the same sort of attitude and have similar interests. It might take you longer than if you like try to please others and be what they want you to be, but you'll be happier.
And they'll be better friends too, proper friends.
Yep.
How on earth did you get on this roof?
I climbed up the ladder.
Oh, so close.
I don't know. I'm good at parkouring in this game. What can I say?
That's it. I'm still in the ladder. I'm gonna put it here. That's easy.
But like a lot of the people, you know, that we we play games as well as role play with the same group of people most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, we kind of like run our own community server, and at the moment we've got Corn and Exiles on there. I mean, it's always the same group of people, but like there's only like I've got one friend in there that I met at university. It's actually through him that me and Spike met. And Spike's got a friend that he's known since he was 17 in there, but the rest of us have met through gaming, and like most of us have been friends for nearly a decade now.
That's very cool.
And you know, they are my closest friends, I would say.
And you've been on many adventures together, and
Oh, we've done lots of stupid shit together. But I'm not afraid to tell them that, like, I'm very, very lucky when it comes to friends. You know, I've made some good friends, and we've kept those friendships with similar-minded people for a long time, and we've got to the point where we're not shy to tell each other that we love each other, you know, and shit like that. And I think there needs to be more of that in the world. People shouldn't be afraid to sort of, you know, to tell your friends that you care about them and stuff like that. We live in a shitty world, you know, and
it's not getting any better either, is it, at the moment?
No, definitely not. And you know, sometimes it'll make somebody's day just to know that they matter, you know. And
Yeah.
why can't people
I'd
be
agree
more
with
like that, you know? So I know that I'm very, very lucky to have the friends that I've got, and I do appreciate them a lot.
The bench. Damn it, I cleaned the bench.
Well, there's multiple benches.
No, it's definitely my bench.
Go down to the lowest posture and look under the bench.
Yeah, I can see where the sneaky little bit of dirt is.
Large bridge slats. Which one's on this here?
Wow, I thought I did this bench really well. Turns out it's pretty terrible. That's more like it.
I find it quite amusing when I watch somebody starting to play this game and just learn it and stuff, and it's like, oh, there's so many sneaky spots. I'm so used to it. I just go on with it. But you know, I have.
How many hours?
Since close to 200, I think. Because I've had this game since it came out, and because I find it so therapeutic. Like, I mean, I finished the game numerous times before the career mode was actually finished. And it's kind of like, what I had a habit of doing is that I would, like I said, I mean, I find I use this as a bit of a therapeutic tool when I'm feeling anxious and stuff as well. So like, I'd play through the career mode, then do all the jobs on free mode, and then reset the game.
Wow.
And then start over because I'm sad. And I've done that multiple times. I did it a lot when there weren't so many levels, but there are a lot more levels now.
Because this isn't a new game, is it? This came out about maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's got to be like 18 months to 2 years, I would say.
2 years, yeah.
Right, what else have we got?
Our lower walls. I have no idea where that is.
Okay, it's these ones. It's the ones behind the net. Yes.
Ah, right. I see a bit there. Nope, I don't. That's just water.
Tower support strut. Oh. So some bit of moss on there.
Our trims.
I need the ladder.
Right?
Yep. Right, so
Good job I got you here. I tell you what, I can't see these at all.
which tower trim is that?
Oh, I really want to go across the monkey bars.
I can't see which bit this is.
Ah.
Which are the trims?
I'm thinking that's the red bits, right? No, that's a strap. I'm looking at the wrong bits. That doesn't help me. What the hell's a trim then? Did you find it?
No.
What bit's a trim?
I've even got it highlighted and I can't see it flashing.
Oh,
I found it, I found it, I found it.
is it down the bottom?
It's this very bottom yellow slat. I think
Cheeky.
it's on the outside here. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's the tiniest bit. Come around here, where this net is, and hold your tab down. It's like the tiniest piece of dirt.
Oh, how rude. Did that get it?
Not quite. This is the last thing we've got to clean, so there's something on here.
Yes!
It's like the smallest speck.
That was awesome.
There you go.
I like this game. It's a lot of fun. I like this bit especially, watching the... Oh my god, you can just watch me trying to get that ball up that bloody thing. Man, I put so much time and effort into that. I'll come back when I've got like a more powerful jet.
Yeah, when you get the next jet up, I think you should be able to do it. I'm
Oh,
pretty sure
hang
I
on.
did it with the next one.
I've just turned level 15. I think that's what I need for a medium power.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause
it
you've got
is.
so many stars now, isn't it?
Have I just upgraded? Or do I have to swap it?
Once you start the next level, you've just got to switch it over with pressing E.
I'm going to give it one go.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the urban X2. I'm pretty sure that's what I did that ball with. Do you need the steps bringing over again?
I don't know. I feel more confident with this one. It feels like it has more
It's
fight
got
to it.
well, it's got almost double the power of the last one. So
Let's see. Oh, wow, the pressure. Damn it, that was unintentional. Come back over here.
see, I can't even see your ball. So
Stop shooting it. Pond off the floor.
Oh, need a bit of a run up. Come on now. Oh, so bloody close. Try the next one down. Yellow. Am I doing this right?
from what I can tell, yeah.
Just not getting the luck.
There's definitely luck involved.
Is there a lot?
This footstool, I've brought this footstool over if you need to block one side, bottom of the slide.
Oh.
Crouch. You might get a better angle on the ball. Yeah.
Oh, you can't just push it up with your body.
No, you can't.
What, dog?
Oh!
this?
I don't think it's going to go. What happens if you spray in about the same area I am? Do you reckon that would work?
I don't know whether my spray interacts with it or not.
Yes, it does. It does. Oh, a bit lower. Oh, that was so close. Oh, go on, go on, go on. Yes.
No.
Did we get it or not?
I don't know, did you?
Yes, we got it.
Yeah? Oh, well done, mate.
Thank you, Mel. That was Mel. Oh, man. I'm so glad I did that. I was so determined. Couldn't have done it without you. Mel, thank you so much for taking the time to do this for me today.
No, not anytime.
It's been really interesting. I don't know whether to label this first look at PowerWash Simulator or everything you ever wanted to know about role-playing. Yeah. It's just been fantastic. I've learnt huge amounts and I've had a great time as well. So many thank yous for that.
And I'm just going to put this out there. If you ever want to do a tester game, just to try it and to show some of your viewers, I'd be happy to run one for you.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I may very well take you up on that. You've definitely intrigued me. I've learnt so much more that my understanding has completely changed. So yeah, I think that may be a thing in the future.
In the time it's been washing floors and talking RPGs with you, I've made 400 grand.
Oh, nice. Well done.
That's
It's
a good job,
400 grand while we've been doing this.
All round a very good day. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the video. Thank you for watching, everybody. It's been absolutely awesome. Massive thank you to Mel. She's been absolutely incredible today. And yeah, if you want to know more about RPG, let me know in the comments section below, and I can either show you the next video where we maybe do an RPG test run, or put you in the direction of Mel, who clearly knows her stuff inside and out. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks again, Mel.
Inside and out, but some of them I do. World of Darkness I know very, very, very well, and I know nearly all of the lore off by heart.
There you go. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Goodbye for now.
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone.